Welcome everybody to the Break the Rules stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, Lev Po on Twitter. We got Giovanni Pennacchietti, my main man over here. We've got Auron MacIntyre, and we have our guest of honor today, Wilfred Reilly, who is an American political scientist, assistant professor of political science at Kentucky State University, and PhD in political science from Southern Illinois University with a law degree from University of Illinois, and your focus is on the empirical testing of political claims. You are the writer of Hate Crime Hoax, How the Left is Selling a Fake Race War, and as well as a couple of other books that I have right over here. We have Taboo, 10 Facts You Can Talk About as well. So please check those books out. Please support Wilfred. And let's get this started. First off, Wilfred, Professor Reilly, what would you prefer me to call you, first off?
Most people in friendly conversations like this call me Will or Wilfred, I guess. Either name is perfectly acceptable. You can choose.
All right, where there's a will, there's a way. So, Wilfred, when it comes to
the assumption that it will be friendly all the way, but
yes, it will. No. BTR is a stream of peace. That's what I always say, and I stand by those words. Anyway, when it comes to you being in the position that you are today, what exactly motivated you first off to become a professor? And do you find things are different in current year in 2021 as opposed to when you started being a professor? So that would be the first kind of cementing question.
And also, what was your doctoral thesis? That's interesting.
Yeah, my doctoral dissertation actually looked at it's one of the few empirical tests of what you could call white privilege that I've found. So in 1992, a guy named Andrew Hacker, he's a good political scientist, he's a Queen's U professor, but asked a group of white kids, and I mean, this is white kids in Queens in the early 90s, so you can judge that sample as you will, but he asked a group of white kids how much they'd have to be paid to become Black. And the average answer was $50 million. And this really, along with an essay by a writer named Peggy McIntosh, started the white privilege idea. The idea was that this is such a racist, institutionally wicked country that you'd have to pay a white man $50 million for him to agree to become Black if this were possible. And for my dissertation, which really actually started the theme of me being interested in this kind of thing, my question was, I asked 2,000 people across all racial and other lines. First, I mean, do you think this is a worthwhile question at all? Would you consider changing a characteristic like your race? And if so, how much money would you demand, just theoretically, if we had the magic machines and so on? And what we found was that whites, in fact, were one of the least racist groups. The most racist group was old Asian men, if you take this as a measure of racism at all, who would frequently in the qualitative portion say things like, I prefer my society to your, mayfly, impure Western culture, so on down the line. African Americans finished a bit ahead of whites. It was pretty close. But the average amount of money that was demanded by everyone to change their race was about 80 million. First of all, I guess you have to adjust for inflation. And secondarily, the minorities, with the exception of Hispanics, were significantly more identified than whites were. So I did some kind of theoretical writing on the idea of white privilege and what this means, and suggested that we always need to test these concepts if you're talking about fragility or appropriation or something like that, which later grew into a lot of the research that I do now. And the other chapters of the dissertation go beyond race. I mean, so I asked people if they'd consider changing their sexual identity, their sexual orientation, their faith tradition, assuming they truly believed in it. Ironically, atheists were more likely to do so than members of most religions truly identify with being an atheist. But at any rate, I found one, everyone is equally racist, first. Two, a lot of the measures we use of things like racism are pretty badly flawed. I'm not sure they measure much of anything. You just want to keep being white, for example. And three, I found that people are much more attached to a number of other things. I've since found this with national citizenship than we are to race. So the percentage of heterosexual males who would agree to a hypothetical change in sexual orientation was basically zero. People didn't want to change their sex. This is especially true for women who describe men as dumb and slovenly and so on. Anyway, so that's the dissertation. What do people actually value, and how much does that gel with kind of a lot of the high profile, sometimes pretty woke stuff we hear?
Well, what year was the dissertation?
I got my PhD in 2015. The dissertation later came out as a very small press book in like 2017. I got out of SIU in the spring of 2015, I guess.
It's very interesting because, and I want to also get to my question about why you became a college professor in the first place, but it is very interesting to think of today's NB culture, as now some people are calling it, where it is a lot of women who are jumping on the bandwagon of being much more ambiguous as far as what gender they are. It seems to be a very popular thing today. In Sweden, it's like an astronomical rate of like many percentages of women who claim to have sexual dysphoria, who got onto a similar train, and I really doubt that all of them are experiencing the same things that may be experienced by a very small percentage of people. So it's interesting that you mentioned that women in particular did not want to change their sex.
Well, there's a difference between sex and gender, obviously. And I don't mean to mock the second concept, but gender is a pretty vague, ambiguous idea. And saying that you're changing your gender can signify anything from a mental condition to social rebellion. I mean, there's a great deal of work along both lines. When women were asked why they wouldn't change their sex, they said to be blunt, people said things like, I like getting wet. Like, I mean, it was a physical... It didn't have much
Go to the pool. Go to the pool. I don't know what to tell you.
Same thing as a guy, identical. But no, I mean, like, people said things like, I want to be able to have my firstborn daughter. Like, that was something that was very interesting about the dissertation, because at this point, gender ideology was taking hold already in academia. 2015 at a fairly good school. But none of the women that we were talking to mentioned gender at all. In fact, some of them said, well, I take it for granted. I can change my gender if I want to. But that wouldn't make me not physically a woman. The challenge to sex hadn't yet happened. So gender is something.
What would be the change then? That's what I'm kind of trying to figure out. If it's not that, then what's the change?
Well, if you're changing your sex, you'd go from having a vagina to having a penis.
Yes, but in the case of gender, what is the change?
Oh, I didn't ask about gender because I consider it such an ambiguous concept as a quant. I'm very curious about this. This is something I've done basic preliminary surveys on. So if you define I guess it would be gender, it wouldn't be your sex. If you define your sex identity, let's say, as something different from kind of your chromosomal order and the reproductive system you have and so on, and it's actually really easy to break down what sex is. You would just say, eliminating intersex people, the definition is X, a non-all XX chromosomal order and so on. It takes about 30 seconds. But if you're defining sex identity as something other than sex, what does it mean? And I've never gotten a quantifiable answer to that. Not necessarily picking a fight with the trans movement right now, but I've never heard anyone say, well, clearly it's these exact 17 things that involve stereotyping in modern society. So to say I'm changing my gender could be as simple as me saying I am a woman. So I didn't ask about gender. I specifically said, like, the question asked things like your breast would vanish, you would change, you would become a man, but you would have your full set of, recent past and resolute and so on memories. Would you do it? And women said no, because then I wouldn't be able to get pregnant and give birth, or then I'd have to worry about sexual assault allegations as a male. It was very specifically focused on the sex component of this. Gender wasn't really mentioned at all.
Very interesting. So going back then to the very past, why a professor? Why this particular career? And I know you were in business before as well, so what prompted the switch?
Well, I think that some things you just generally do. If the academic job offers I'd gotten had all sucked, if none of them had been from, state U's or interesting thinking institutions, I mean, I probably would have just stayed in the working world. But generally, when you get a PhD, you go teach in academia. To the point where this is almost a joke. Like, if you ask someone, what are you going to do with a Black Studies degree? They will say, teach other people to get Black Studies degrees. So I graduated from law school when I was very young. I think I was 20. And I had done pretty well, but I was also kind of an immature jackass in law school. So I didn't want to go into what I was primarily training for, which I guess would have been white-collar criminal prosecution. If you look at the classes I took, it was very serious, nose to the grindstone, so on. And I got an offer from Southern Illinois, which in political science is a top 100 program. It's also located in a fun kind of party school environment. And they asked, do you want to come down here and get a PhD for free for 4 or 5 years? And I said, yeah, sure. I'll, work on my Frisbee skills. So I went back to Carbondale, Illinois, And this actually stretched into a very long period of time. I mean, my mom got sick. I went back to Chicago. I worked as a traveling canvas activist for the Human Rights Campaign for years. So this was like street canvassing in hostile areas for these causes that would make people want to fight you, like gay rights. It was a very enjoyable job. A lot of people, almost everyone was mid-20s, a lot of college athletes on break and so on. People would pretty frequently have office romances, would be a polite way to put it. You know, there's a good deal of hostile encounter with the general populace if you're standing there like, hey, got a minute for gay love? So this went on for a couple of years, and I got tired of getting in arguments and fights with people.
I guess it also depends on how they interpret that question.
Yeah, you never know. But I mean, no, definitely, like complete strangers would hit on you, would sometimes offer sex. I mean, I've had that happen from men and women, 50 pounds ago when I was still street canvassing. But I mean, it was a fascinating job. Like, one of the things that's really interesting about this is that there's this whole organized sort of mercantile enterprise on the political left that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, where organizations like the Human Rights Campaign will retain an organization, let's call them the People's Project, because I still have some fond feelings for them, but tell them to provide canvassers to run a campaign either locally or across states, sometimes in a pretty dangerous region, sometimes a political campaign. And the People's Project will hire 5,000 reasonably tough-looking people that have no real background in what they're doing in gay rights campaigning or whatever, and will send them to this area. And it's a pretty competitive process. I mean, generally, you have to at least once every 3 days make a pretty large amount of money that's known as quota, which might be, say, $500. If you don't, you're fired on the spot. Turnover is about 99%. But the people that rise through these ranks become kind of the apparatchiks on the left. Like, I've kept in touch with friends in that network, and they're now working for the Environment Americas and so on down the line, sparring with politicians. So it's one of the most intense kind of feeding frenzy jobs I've ever been in terms of what your actual chances of success are. But anyway, so I got tired of doing that after a while, and good enough causes. But the other thing Chicago is known for is being kind of in addition to, radicalism and arts and so on, is being the mercantile hub for the Midwest. So I basically just, if someone is going for a PhD, went down to LaSalle Street and got a job. Like, I worked in the international headquarters for Marcus Evans, the British company known for aggressive outreach to CEOs. I sold high-end ads for a while. Interviewed with Goldman, never really worked on the trading side of things. But anyway, I did a bunch of like city kid crap. I managed a nightclub for a while until I got the degree. And then it was just sort of like, well, let's see what this does. I'm very stable financially because of all these crazy jobs. So I applied. And if you come from an SIU or a U of I, you're going to be getting interviews probably generally the next level down in Western Wisconsin or something like that. And so I got Kentucky State, that sort of thing. I liked the Kentucky State pitch, which is that we're a historically Black college in Appalachia. Like, it seemed like an actual chance to help kids on both sides of that divide. So when they made a reasonable salary offer and I came, that's basically how I wound up as a college professor. And, they haven't fired me yet. So glad to be here.
Excellent. And do you think they will fire you, or what is the situation on campus right now when it comes to the amount of teachers that operate as you do, as opposed to those who do not?
I don't think they're going to fire me. I have a good relationship with most of our executive team. I also have a tenure contract. It's fairly hard to fire tenured professors.
There we go.
I haven't seen any hostility here. I also will say, historically, Black colleges, I mean, I spent some time in Black business as well. I mean, even the club I ran was a minority-owned institution. KSU, the president is Black. Generally successful minority businesses where you have an Asian guy or a middle-class Black guy, even an urban Jewish guy in charge, there's a little less wokeness. I guess maybe the kid of any of those three could still slant toward the woke, but it's hard for a group of Black millionaires to feel particularly oppressed or to focus a lot on the white man. So at KSU, I mean, I think the focus is more getting fairly well-performing Black kids into medical school than it is on, painting your hair pink and marching around the campus.
Well,
that seems to mostly be an up middle class white thing for whatever reason.
No, definitely. That is definitely the case.
I was going to say that.
And, welcome, by the way, to Daniel. Thank you so much for coming in here. Wonderful young man, up-and-coming YouTube star. I don't know how else to describe you, but thank you so much for coming in.
Well, I would say free thinker, not necessarily a YouTube star. But, yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me again, Lev. I really appreciate invitation.
Absolutely. And you're experiencing what right now going on in your school situation as far as the environment? Just a bit in general. What does it feel like to you personally?
Well, in my school specifically, I wouldn't say that the situation with wokeness, as we call it, is not as extreme as other examples. So the more I guess egregious examples of wokeness would be separating children by race and whatnot. We haven't reached that stage,
Mm.
at least not yet. We actually have a pretty unwoke alumni who have a pretty large, like they have a large say in the direction the direction the school takes. And so, for example, with the SHSAT, there's a huge debate about whether the SHSAT is racist and if SHSAT should be removed uh, for more holistic ways to get more black and brown children. But the alumni won't budge, and we've had the more aggressive ideologues, whether it be teachers or students as well. You know, try to move the administration towards removing the SHSAT, but it hasn't really worked over here at Brooklyn Tech. And Brooklyn Tech, the curriculum is pretty decentralized. So what you are learning is really dependent on the teacher that you have. Fortunately for me, I've had pretty great teachers for the past year, and I'm praying to God that I have really great teachers this year as well. But yes, I've heard horror stories from my friends who, you know, they would be in a U.S. history class and the teacher would only talk about systemic racism rather than actually teaching them about U.S. history. So it really is dependent on the student.
There we go. And by the way, what both you and Wilfred have in common, you are both admirers of Thomas Sowell, and I am as well. So this brings me to Auron MacIntyre, and one thing that I wanted to really discuss today is this quote, which I believe is from Dune, and this does relate, Wilfred, to what you were talking about with your old canvassing days and the buddies who have gotten more to the left from, way back then. The quote is thus: "When I am weaker than you, I ask you for freedom because that is according to your principles. When I am stronger than you, I take away your freedom because that is according to my principles." So I'm curious, actually, I want to start with Auron here. What does this quote personally mean to you as far as what we're currently going through right now? And then I want to get a response from Wilfred as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory to our kind of current moment, but a lot of people, especially kind of on the left, who have been starting to make that transition to the center or to the right, have done so primarily based on free speech grounds. You hear a lot of this from like Glenn Greenwald and guys like Dave Rubin, and they'll say, I was part of the left because they were the ones that were for free speech. They were the ones for, inquiry. They were the ones for an open society where we examine everything. And now all of a sudden that's changing. And really, what a large amount of the left was using that kind of narrative for was to enter into institutions, to make sure that they could be able to enter into the halls of power, and they could bring alternative ideas in there, and they could be persuasive. And that's, of course, exactly what you want to do when you're looking to change the culture. But for some leftists, that was truly what they believed in. And so they were surprised when the people who they thought were on their side suddenly started to close the door behind them, because they started to realize that these people never actually held those values, or if they held them very loosely. And now that they had acquired the power that they had been seeking for decades, it was time to go ahead and roll up that ladder behind them. And so you do have some of the people who really did have those core principles making a lot of noise and kind of leaving those circles. But in large percentages, the left is fine with kind of slamming that door because they know how they got to where they are. And they're certainly not going to leave that avenue open to their opposition, which is why if you say anything remotely right-wing in many different businesses, many different campuses, places in media, you'll be immediately canceled because they know that they can simply not leave this avenue that they use to enter into the halls of power open to their enemies now that they occupy them.
And Wilfred, would you agree with that statement?
I'd agree with quite a lot of it. I mean, in political science, and a lot of the great sci-fi and fantasy books draw pretty heavily on the work of the political philosophers. I mean, a lot of them are better than some of the nonfiction stuff that you see in terms of human relationships. But I mean, the question is, how much do you tolerate intolerance? I mean, this is a real question that's come up, I mean, at least since the Roman and British empires ruled religious fanatics of different stripe. I mean, if someone's belief is, you know, I'm a traditional Islamist, perhaps on the Shia side, or I'm a communist, I think that I have the way, the truth, and the light. And whenever I'm in power, I'm going to pass laws that are going to enforce the way, the truth, and the light. What is that person's role within your society? Like, do you allow them to talk while you have power? It's an interesting question. The short answer has to be yeah, most of the time, I think, but with some social, not legal sanction and with a response automatically ready from your society. But also with the recognition that if they ever take charge, no one else gets to talk. And I think that one thing that surprised a lot of people, this seems to be more of an issue in America on the left. I mean, I think the hard right is at least as crazy as the hard left when you look at the claims no diverse society has ever worked. The world is 6,000 years old. I mean, so on down the pipeline. But I don't think the hard right now, the truly hard alt-right, has any institutional power whatsoever. Whereas the hard left controls a lot of discourse. I mean, academia, media, social media, the NGO sector, they're a power on par with, say, the center right. So, I mean, since the 1950s, really kind of getting to the point, yeah, this has come up where you have coalitions between people who are essentially communists or ethno-Marxists and people who are just genuine good faith liberals that want healthcare. And what you normally see is kind of the hyena dog problem, like the communists eat or ethno-Marxists, quote unquote, eat everybody else, destroy the coalition, take it over. And you see a lot of the people, this very much went on in the 1960s with Horowitz and so on, and the neoliberals and the new left. People that originally were part of that coalition have to flee away from the true believers, generally to the center or the right. What do you do about it? The one answer would be teach honest history, but that's hard to do because so many of the people that are on the ethno-Marxist side are the people running some of these disciplines. The one actual comment about this, without getting into right-wing paranoia, I believe it was Antonin Gramsci, the far left philosopher decades ago, encouraged what he called RIDs to take over kind of the means of discourse. And he said pretty bluntly, like, the RIDs aren't very likely to dominate most national militaries, right? Or take over agriculture or institutional religion, which he recognized as a powerhouse. I still would, you know, sport, although they've made some inroads there, which surprises me. But that sort of thing. So you go where your people are more likely to be found and you control what people hear. And to a remarkable extent, that has happened. To such an extent that absolutely mainstream perspectives like biological sex is real are now often presented as though they were the 49% minority, and something that in truth perhaps 1% of people believe was the most acceptable thing to say. So it's a problem. I don't know an automatic solution. It's been fought in the West for centuries.
And one question that I'm going to raise in the chat here to Wormhatcher is what system would prevent this problem from happening? Because I think the consensus from a lot of people that are pissed off about what's going on right now is that, hey, this is liberalism's fault. Liberalism came in, gave everybody rights, and now the people who are liable to abuse those the most are not, nothing's being done against that. So what exactly do you do about that? I am not for any kind of totalitarianism. I think that those experiments are, we could see the results in when they're actually activated, what happens. I mean, for one thing, the dictator can get crazy, their descendants can get crazy and very paranoid, as we've seen with somebody like Stalin, for example, as well as them hiring very stupid people to be around them because they're afraid of smart people overturning their power, taking them out. So regardless, though, I am curious what you think about the question of liberalism itself. How sturdy of a system is it? And could there have been certain tweaks before we got to the point where we are right now that would have been able to preserve a lot of the things we like as opposed to the things that we do not.
Well, is it really liberalism's fault, or is it due to a certain decay within our liberal societies? I mean, we've seen a philosophical overthrow of many different civilizations who didn't subscribe to liberalism as well. And I'd reckon that what we're seeing here is the uh, the natural result after a natural decay of liberalism, if that makes sense. And so we have certain philosophical tenets that are binding and would not let certain tenets that the left espouse today become mainstream. Like, for example, one Western motif is finding the truth. Yet with critical race theory and other theories that come from that has almost a postmodern bent to it, this idea of one truth, one singular truth has been sort of cut off. And so is it really liberal? That and this idea of truth is a binding feature of liberalism, right? When we're debating certain topics, we are debating using the truth and figuring out what we need to do to solve a problem or to tweak a configuration, right? And so if we have right now many different leftist ideologies that posit that truth is the product of the white man, or patriarchal in nature, then that tenet, that's not liberalism's fault. That's a whole different value hierarchy.
I don't know, Danny. My argument is that it is liberalism's fault. It's the term. It's not just a decay. It's the apotheosis of liberalism. Like my contention would be that to place it into an external thing such as Marxism, I think to some degree, but the problem is the system itself, contrary to what Lev was saying, has produced these outcomes, whether we like it or not.
No, I'm not
saying
saying it did not produce these outcomes. What I'm saying is what would be in place that eventually would not produce these same kind of outcomes other than a dictatorship, which would rise and fall anyway. So I don't really see any way out of here unless, I don't know, Auron or Wilfred, if you guys have any ideas.
I have a quick comment here. I do think that how to deal with the problem of tolerating intolerance is an institutional feature specifically of liberalism, by which I suppose I would mean something like modern, Western, conservative, or leftist, non-dictatorial societies with rights, something along those lines. Because if you allow everyone to kind of say their piece, and someone says, for example, there was a debate on my Twitter page earlier today between sort of hoteps and right-wing white guys about whether women should be allowed to vote. And I eventually shut this nonsense down. But in the USA, you have the ability to say that.
Wait, what side were the hoteps on?
Well, I think no one has a right to vote. But
both of them opposed women voting.
Oh, gotcha.
They were arguing about
the right-wing alliance.
Yeah. Well, actually, that would be true on a lot of things. The hoteps and the alt-righters would agree on a bunch of stuff. But anyway, in all seriousness, though, in the USA, you absolutely have the right to stand up on a soapbox or to use an internet platform with 87,000 followers and say women shouldn't be able to vote. It's a characteristic of free speech societies. Generally, the assumption in political science is that the one type of society that can avoid this sort of thing is a dictatorship or a monarchy. If you want to draw distinctions, so on down the line. The problem with that is that a simple way to say this might be that other societies that believe in some kind of absolute right, whether that's the NRX right of the king to rule, whether that's the right of Islam to be the one religion in the world, whether that's the communist dialectic, societies that believe in, the one truth and the sword are pretty good at shutting down other representatives of other societies that believe in the one truth and the sword. The problem is that they don't have kind of the liberal free exchange that we take for granted. You can't say shit about the king in a monarchy. It's actually a crime. Laissez majesté, if I have that pronounced correctly. French isn't a language I speak. But so that is the issue. If you have a free society, everyone gets to say their piece freely, no matter how idiotic it is. I will say that to some extent, when you talk about the fault of liberalism, I do think that there are confident liberal societies and then there are non-confident liberal societies. So societies that have a lot of faith and trust in their principles, like the USA, for all our flaws, is a pretty good society. We were the first large-scale modern democracy, so on, tend to shut this sort of thing down pretty quickly. I mean, there's, like, for example, you're now seeing discussion of laws against certain CRT practices, like telling white kids they're evil. It really surprises me that there's a coherent movement against doing that. You shouldn't tell black kids they're evil either. And I would suspect that going back into the 1950s or something like that, the majority of people would have had no problem, let's say, preaching about the overthrow of the government being against the law. In fact, it was. So kind of getting to the point, I think one issue here is that we've gotten so used to this kind of stuff. Extreme left nonsense has become so pervasive in our institutions that it's actually eroding confidence in the country. So that's what people mean when they use terms like institutional takeover. The majority of kids now think that communism is good and capitalism is bad, and they think that because someone told them this.
Yeah, but these weaknesses that you're pointing out in the system were predictable, which is why Gramsci pointed them out. Like this, he's rotting away in Mussolini's prison, and he's saying, why does Russia have a successful revolution and I'm trapped here? And he figures out that Western countries are basically too rich to have this pull off. So you need a different axis with which to actually attack. And so he predicts all of these weaknesses and outlines how to exploit them. And Burnham warns about this in Suicide of the West. He says, liberalism is Western suicide. This is how it's going to fall. And so the problem is that these weaknesses are not new. They're not unique. They haven't just come about because of a new, radical leftist ideology that has somehow, unmoored it. These have always been things that people not only predicted and foresaw, but actively targeted with these ideologies, and we're extremely successful at doing so. I don't think this is some new manifestation in the last 20 or 30 years. I think this is something that has been predictable all the way back, almost 100 years, and people called out, saw it coming, planned how to use it, and did so successfully.
Well, even 1,000 years. I mean, John Glubb, for instance, analyzed the decline of certain empires in the Arab world, where in his paper, what was it called? I think it was just simply called The Decline of the West. But he talks about a lot of similar themes when a society loses its sort of thumos and its identity and its impulse towards self-preservation. I think the question is very interesting when it comes to America and Canada, where I'm from, or these sort of multicultural countries, because in a country that does have a majority of let's say a racial or a cultural or a religious population, it's much easier to make the case that they have a right to preserve themselves from harmful ideas. But in a multicultural society, I don't know, it's a very difficult question. I mean, but what I wanted to ask, just if we want to continue this point, but what I want to ask Professor Reilly, I also come from a political science background. I unfortunately fortunately didn't descend to the PhD level, the master's level, but I was more the theory in a political science. But just to play devil's advocate, what would you say as someone who's very quantitative in your analysis, that I'm just thinking of like when I was in, methods courses and critical methods courses, we were, taught people like Iris Young, what was her book called? Justice and Difference in Political Economy, something like that, about the sort of critique of a very quantitative outlook in the social sciences. We started this conversation off with discussions of, for example, how do we measure happiness? How do we measure gender preferences? As much as I'm not of that sort of, postmodern feminist persuasion, I do think that there are some critiques towards a quantitative outlook, specifically when it comes to political questions dealing with the human subject. So how would you defend the criticisms of specifically those, let's call them studies departments, who would critique a very sort of numbers-based and statistical average-based approach to how we solve various questions in political economy and so forth?
Well, I think there are 2 points there. First of all, I think a lot of purely quantitative analysis is worthless. It's
Yeah.
not that I'm not like really, I think a better way to say that would be, I think a lot of it is brilliant theoretical philosophy that we can discuss without resolution. A lot of it is equally brilliant inspiration where I generally try to have a qualitative person if I'm thinking about a serious paper where we can parse out what a concept is. So to some extent, I'm teasing the non-credgy folks. But I think that there are really two levels to this. When you're discussing what is basically philosophy, like political theory about what the best society is, I do think some of that can be quantified, but I also think a lot of the qualitative stuff is intelligent and worth listening to. I think that a bigger issue I have with ideas like white fragility, for example, is that these are explicitly quantitative ideas. I'd be very willing to talk to D'Angelo, the author of the book, and see how she would quantify this or something like that. But there's a claim that's, although I don't think she's put a lot of thought into that, but there's a claim that's being made. I mean, she's saying on, I think, page 16, that if you expose white people to critiques about their race, they're going to be more sensitive than people of color. That's the whole thesis of the book. White people don't have to ever hear racial critiques, to which I'd say, what? But anyway, white people don't ever, in post-1960s America, hear critiques of their race, just constant compliments of whites, especially males. And so whites are more sensitive. And when they hear a critique, they're more likely to react with anger or violence. That's the book. That's really, really testable. I mean, you could set up a focus group where you ask a group of 15 people, what are the major stereotypes of whites and blacks? And I'm pretty sure if you had a diverse racial group, you'd get them all. And then you would confront people with those stereotypes. You'd say, do 100 structured interviews where you'd ask the white guy. People often accuse your group of being a bunch of pampered, racist beer drinkers. How, on a 1 to 10 scale, how angry does that make you feel? If you really had good grant funding, I mean, you could wire electrodes to these people's heads. Like, it wouldn't be hard to test this at all. Then you would do it with the black group. So people accuse you guys of being a bunch of low IQ criminals. I'm not endorsing either of these stereotypes, by the way. I'm white and black. But I mean, how do the black guys react? I think you'd find something very similar to what I did during my dissertation. Similar levels of anger with the minorities have been in the lead. Like, I don't think there's any white fragility at all, because I think there's an empirical way to test that. You can act like an asshole to a white person and see if they react any differently than a black person or a Hispanic guy. And as someone who drives in traffic in a city, I've seen no evidence of this ever. So that's my response. Obviously, there's a place for qualitative philosophy and theory. It's often jokes aside the bedrock of what we do. But when people start making what are quantifiable points, when people start saying whites lead the world in cultural appropriation, or there's a massive amount of white privilege once you adjust for social class, or blacks or whites or whatever the group might be are more fragile, which is a hell of a thing to say about another group of people, especially, and perhaps stereotypically, but males. That's a testable hypothesis. Is that true? So do 10 different tests where you confront people with different stereotypes and see if it is. And I think we can all objectively at some level know that it's probably not. Last very quick point about the studies fields. Peter Boghossian, a nice guy, casual friend of mine, uses the term idea laundering, where he says that very often, if, for example, you guys, a bunch of obviously like smart, witty, to some extent laymen, master's degrees and so on, if you were to comment on anything from COVID-19 to feminism, a typical response would be something along the lines of, what are you, a doctor? You know, like the immediate reply would be, shut up, you're not dealing with the science. And a great deal of the science, when you look in the grievance studies fields, is sort of the non-quantitative portion of a sociology paper quoting a non-academic book by Ibram Kendi that was published a few years ago. But because this sentence is now in a paper, it's taken and it can be quoted in other scientific papers. So 1,000 people say something like, obviously, all group gaps are the result of racism, which is just straight up nonsense. And I think a lot of intelligent people intuitively recognize that this is nonsense, along the lines of, you know, women don't have vaginas, the conversation point earlier, but are very often sort of bluffed and shamed out of expressing why they feel this way. When you get into things that can be quantified and discussed academically, I don't think that there's any particular reason to treat a claim that began in the qualitative space any differently. It's true or it's not.
Well, another follow-up would be, before we move on,
Okay.
is when it comes to the quantitative aspects even, what is your opinion on, they have a specific acronym for them, but they're the unconscious bias tests, you know, those ones?
Oh, yeah, IATs.
Yeah, there you go. What is your opinion on when people try to like quote unquote prove the racism of white people by giving them this sort of hermeneutic of suspicion test, as I would call it. Like, what do you think of that type of quantitative approach to determining like how racist one group or the other is?
So, I mean, first of all, the hermeneutic of suspicion is a good line. My take on this is that right now so this actually gets into a broader conversation, what's sometimes called the culturalist, hereditarian, critical debate across social science. Are gaps between groups of people due to culture, which I think is pretty obviously the answer. There's a 400% spread in incomes among white American groups admitted during the same time historically through the same immigration process. You know, Cajuns, Frenchmen, and French Canadians make dramatically different amounts of money. I don't see how there could be a genetic or a racism-based explanation for that. But so there's culturalism, there's hereditarianism, which says that genes play at least some role here. I think they're probably wrong, but there are people like Bo Wingard and Noah Carl that have, at least until the Great Awakening, taught in pretty prestigious colleges and said this. And then there's CRT, which is the argument that all of this must be due to some advanced form of racism. And I think that right now, CRT is the most publicly acceptable of these platforms, which have fought each other about equally for 50 years. And I mean, it's silly to deny any of them exist. But so we tend to focus, getting to the point, we tend to focus a lot of time on trying to find racism. So like there's stereotype threat, where the idea that being thought worse at a test makes you do about 3% worse if you actually read through the papers. They rarely pull out the coefficients and say, okay, this is 2%. But I've done it a few times. It's not a massive effect. There is implicit association, implicit bias, which is the idea that many people, especially whites, have subtle forms of prejudice against women, the poor, blacks, and the like. Okay. And this just goes on and on. There are audit studies where you prepare identical resumes for, say, a white guy and an Asian guy, and you send them into a white business, although I will note, never an Asian business, and you find that the white guy is 7% less likely to get hired. I think all of this is looking at this one variable because that one variable is acceptable. Like, I think that if you were to look at study time among white, black, and Asian kids, you would find, or white, black, Asian, and Nigerian kids, and Nigerians probably beat everybody, but you would find gaps that are like 30, 40% effects on grades. We wouldn't be talking about 2% here. People don't do that because it's less socially acceptable. For that matter, I don't really think this effect would sustain across races, but if you just looked at the individual level at how smart people's mothers were, and then how well they did in life, you'd find like a 0.8 correlation. So there's a really intense attempt to focus on racism right now because that's the okay one of the 10 variables that have an effect to talk about. What do I think of IATs? I think that your level of implicit bias has the usual 2 or 3% effect on how you do in life. It's very, very low. I test as biased against whites, interestingly enough. Like, I'm black, white, and native. I'm from a big city. I took the test and I tested as strongly biased against Caucasians. I took it with my girlfriend who was white. And it was just sort of like, I don't know about this. What does this mean? What it means in practice is that they identify a slower level of reactivity to like a member of a rival group's face. I said rival group, I might be a bigot, but a slower reactivity time to a white or black or whatever face as a sign of bigotry. You're slower to say very good when you see the face of someone you might perceive as an opponent. This even extends to people wearing rival athletic jerseys and so on. The question is what difference that makes in life. Like, I grew up in a tough Chicago neighborhood, so I wouldn't be surprised if I saw either hood African Americans or athletic looking whites or skinheads, members of a whole bunch of groups as potential enemies. But would that affect me in the hiring process where I'm pretty sure the client's not a Black Panther or a Nazi? I mean, I can't imagine it does, and we don't find that it does. That's the short form there.
Well, this brings me to the debate that you had with Jared Taylor. One of the things that you were asking in the auditorium is, how many of you guys would, start a riot with each other? Obviously, nobody would. But that brings me to an interesting comparison where, on one hand, we were talking about the Ivy League college kids being the next generation of leaders who would start to create a lot of this racial tension from their leftism. That would be on the top of the totem pole, let's say, society-wise. On the bottom of the totem pole, though, you would have situations like Jared Taylor discussed as were happening, let's say, in California with the black kids versus Mexican kids riots that were going on. And that is a very important question for me, where if there is somebody like, anybody like Daniel or anybody who would come to me who I would speak with for just 1 minute, I would instantly be able to tell a lot about where they're coming from, instantly be able to tell, let's say, what level of civilization somebody is on, regardless of where they came from, purely by how they're able to speak, what they think about, all kinds of telltale signs. But then we have a lot of people who, just like in any society in any part of the world, you do have people who are not as educated, are, like much lower class, and when it comes to the tensions that build up there and how exactly those tensions can be addressed, I'm curious, looking back on the conversation debate that you had with Jared Taylor, what exactly would you say would be the way out for those more low-income groups as far as there being more harmony and stability?
Well, I'm a big fan of honesty, and I think a lack of honesty, a lack of the sharing of widely accepted scientific results in many cases makes discussions like this far more complex than they have to be. So first of all, one of the things that I disagreed with and still disagree with Jared Taylor on is the idea of racial immigration versus merit immigration. So, I mean, people on the alt political right, dissident right, whatever, will often trot out things like, well, right now, Hispanics perform at X level on the IQ boards, are less successful as performative athletes in the USA than whites or blacks. You could go through levels of this stuff. Why would we allow Hispanic immigration? And the answer, other than calling out some of the actual racism now, like 70% of Hispanics are Caucasian. So there has to be, at least to some large extent, a non-genetic explanation for this. I mean, what do you see in the second generation? What do you see in the third? But in addition to just sort of saying, well, hey, a lot of that sounds pretty bigoted, an actual empirical response is, why don't we just have merit immigration? Why don't we just set a baseline IQ, fitness, et cetera standard for immigrants and then let in anyone who meets it? I haven't noticed that there's any white hostility to Japanese or Ghanaian or whatever immigrants whatsoever. There's not. I mean, there's extremely high levels of welcome for both groups, over 85%. So that's the answer. I don't think, in a sentence, I don't think diversity per se is the issue. If you look at Singapore and so on, people with bachelor's degrees and good jobs don't generally fight.
Well, Jared Taylor would say that the Japanese are kind of like white people, though, in some ways.
It's just made up nonsense. I mean, so Jared Taylor is an intellectual guy, but this is something we've started to see. Have you guys seen that clip when wokes and racists think alike?
Oh yeah.
The dumb joke, but they go through like 15 things like Black and Asian people that do really well in school are just white. I think you see this on the hard right and you see this on the hard left. Obviously, if there are any two groups that are more distinct from traditional Western civilization, knights versus samurai versus Bantu warriors, it would be Japanese people and West African people, who are the two most welcome in many ways groups of immigrants into the United States. So I don't think you can just look at a Japanese guy and a Nigerian guy and say, oh, those guys are white. That sounds like nonsense.
But then the interesting thing here is that among the West African immigrants, if we're talking about people like you mentioned from Nigeria, from what I understand, when they would come here, they would assimilate really well because they're already on top of the ball as far as education goes. But if we are, again, talking about people who are here right now in America, who are, on a very low educational level, that problem seems to be kind of shoved under the bed in a lot of these conversations. And I want to figure out, like, how can we...
Yeah, the other argument in the chat is that they accept them because there's so few of them compared to Hispanics or...
Well, no, but there are so few of educated people in general. You're always going to have more dumb people than smart people. So as far as how do we deal with this situation where we do have just, in general, in the world, we have a lot of...
I actually think there's a pretty clear answer to that in quantitative political science. Be honest, have merit immigration. A final line would be recognize that race, when it causes hostility, is usually a proxy for other things. I find that, again, both the alt-right and the hard left tend to confuse a lot of concepts. This might sound like wonky BS, but that are genuinely valid and worth separating in a quantitative academic paper. So race and ethnicity are not the same thing, for example. People will very frequently say, well, if you look around the world, the most conflicted societies are the most diverse. Well, kinda. I mean, I unpacked this for a paper for the Midwest Political Science Association conference once, and I found out that all of those conflicted diverse societies are either all white or all black. So, like, one of them was Tanzania, one was Congo, one was Bosnia, one was Afghanistan, and you could just go on straight down the line. Like, it's totally fair to say there's a lot of ethnic diversity in the former Yugoslavia. but everyone there is white. And I don't mean to sound racist, but as an upper middle class Black American, they look identical to me. When you look at Bosniaks versus Serbs versus Croats versus Jews versus Roma, you're looking at a bunch of dark-skinned white people who to me resemble poets. Like it's a very specific population group. They've all been fighting for 1,000 years. So that kind of tribalism, which actually is a precursor to sort of stable civilized racial diversity, by the way. You're not necessarily a trading entry port where you have Black and Asian merchants and so on if you're Afghanistan. That is where you see the most violence and the most conflict. It is ethnic, it's not racial. In the USA, you could argue certainly that ethnic diversity, i.e. Caucasian Hispanics versus Caucasian whites, Italians versus Irishmen back in the day, has been the cause of at least as much violence as Black-white conflict. I recognize that. But it's a bit late for us to try to be an ethno-state in the USA. I mean, if you go to Wikipedia or Britannica, we have 89 distinct census ethnic groups in the USA, most of which are either white or Black. So ethnicity has this effect. The question that's now being studied in political science, because there's so few integrated, stable societies, Brazil, Singapore, USA, Canada, when it comes to race, the great racial populations, is does race have the effect ethnicity does? And it seems to depend. It doesn't if you have merit immigration. So the Japanese and Nigerian and so on people entering are smart taxpayers that marry blondes or Americans of any other variety. If you admit large numbers of quote unquote non-merit immigrants to a hyper-competitive society with a bunch of guns, yeah, you'll get violence. But my point here is that race itself, one sentence, is basically a proxy. It maybe is 5% different from ethnicity in either direction, but is basically a proxy for other things like current test performance, income, so on down the line. So when people say there's a lot of poverty in Black communities, I mean, there's an equivalent amount of poverty in Appalachian communities where you're going to see similar academic performances, a similar history of oppression, similar rates of drug use, and so on down the line. I don't have any problem at all with saying there's a problem in both of those poor communities and there's a higher murder rate in the Black poor community. And then at least you have a practical solution of, well, let's work on poverty.
Well, there was one other thing beyond poverty, something that Wormhatcher mentioned in the chat, where Wormhatcher asked, assimilate to what, though? To market demands? This is another thing that's frustrating a lot of people when it's not even so much about whether people who emigrate here would be educated or not educated. What I think people are concerned about is that the culture that the masses of us are going into anyway with this highly connected internet culture is one that does not have roots to anything higher other than just mass consumption. Now you could say, well, that's not everybody, but I wonder how many people it is where it actually does matter culturally, because I don't want people to be these empty-headed automatons that just get stimulated by internet stimuli either, you know? So
then I want to hear Auron's opinion on all this.
Definitely. Oh, well,
wait, hold on, but
yes.
but groups that, or I would say the successful groups that assimilate here aren't necessarily what they do they assimilate to market demands?
No, he means like what is the Western society offer these groups as opposed to their own like cultural identity, culture, ethnic, racial identity.
Well,
I think that was the.
Well, I can speak to experience. My parents are immigrants. They're both Haitian and they're devout Christians. That's first of all. I would say that a lot of the successful groups that come here are very, they subscribe to the Protestant work ethic. That's one thing. It's not as if like America doesn't have a culture at all. Yeah, of course we have like, we're starting to have a consumer culture more and more today, but there are certain key figures of like American culture that very successful groups they adapt very well to. Like, for example, Blacks in the West Indies, they're really family oriented, and they're more likely to focus on education. I know for a fact, my parents personally, my dad wouldn't even let me play sports for a portion of my teenage years because he wanted me to study rather than go and play soccer or basketball or whatever. These groups are, again, more religious, and they put their heads down and they go to work more. And so it isn't just market demand. There are certain things that really makes you a very productive American, and a lot of very successful groups who assimilate here have those traits.
Well, another comment that we have from Lisa Boat here talks about how, and again, I'm not the scientist here, I don't have any statistics on this, but this idea that this urge to succeed and want success for your kids, it's not going to last the generations, and eventually that also is going to fade out over time. And then the question is, what are people left with that they could resonate with? But let me go to Auron and then Wilfred. So I'm curious, Auron, what your take is on this idea of concentrating on making money, having a good job, obviously providing for your kids, but not really retaining some kind of a not even retaining cultural value, but not integrating into the culture that already is part of the United States, and what ramifications that may have over time. So, Auron, go for it.
Yeah, so let's see if I can craft an answer that's going to get me in trouble with everybody here. So I think that treating America as some kind of economic zone is a disaster. I think treating your nation as an economic zone primarily is a disaster, and I think we're seeing exactly why. I will agree to some extent with Wilfred that Oswald Spengler said that one of the worst things that ever happened was this idea that race is tied to genetics.
That's
he
right.
He said this is one of the most disastrous ideas that ever.
Funny, Evola said the same too. So,
yeah. So I think there is a lot of conflation with race and ethnos and what they mean for your nation. But at the same time, I would also say that the idea of just purely merit-based immigration and just bringing people in because they meet a certain IQ standard or a certain income standard is also a horrible disaster. Designing your polity on a spreadsheet is something that would have Thomas Carlyle lighting the world on fire. Like it's a great way to make sure that your nation just enters a really cynical and mercenary type of existence. I think that you need. I think that it's unhealthy to focus entirely just on like you said, the pure genetics of race. I don't think that that's a healthy identity in and of itself for a nation. But I think also treating your nation as something that's transitory, that people can just enter and leave at will, that is entirely creedal or entirely economic, or should only have those factors brought in, is also something that kind of spells doom for it as well.
Wilfred, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, this gets into kind of the theoretical versus the quantitative. I mean, they're good points on both sides. First of all, one of the issues with debating this, especially outside of an academic conference or something like that, is the many different meanings of words like race. So, I mean, or nation, where you have famous definitions going back hundreds of years, like a people living in a place. In reality, the traditional definitions of race, i.e. the sub-races of the European race and so on, would have barred almost anyone who didn't resemble the early English settlers from the USA. I mean, in the 1700s or the 1800s, it would have been absolutely commonplace to speak of the German race or the Irish race. If you look at the 1924 Immigration Act, actually, the argument was that we needed to keep out those damn Southern and Eastern Europeans that became the Italian community, Jewish community, so on, because they're savages and animals. I mean, the language used.
Well, we are animals, I gotta say.
We're
party animals.
Oh, but I mean, but the point is that obviously now today we would consider most of those people to be white. We've created an assimilationist identity to some extent. That's extremely common. I wouldn't be surprised that as we trade with the highly successful Black Island nations and the growing Latin American powers and so on over the next 100 years, that Chinese and we spar back and forth, there's an assimilationist identity called something like Westlandish, used to refer to people who look like Americans but have integrated backgrounds. I'm making that up, but there's no reason at all that wouldn't happen. That's essentially what happened with whites. There are very few distinctions between Irish and Italian Americans today. These groups hate each other.
Although it's interesting, like I may be wrong about this about Latin America, but I think that when it comes to Mexico, for example, there is sort of a caste system in place. Maybe there isn't. I don't know. You could tell me as far as...
Well, that's even kind of based on race as well, because it tends to be that in Latin America, the upper classes have more of an European admixture. That's not true everywhere, but I mean, Argentina and Mexico, it's certainly true, and Brazil.
It's true in many Latin American countries, but it's also true that this gets into the genetic culturalist crit interplay again. All of the people in Mexico, with very few exceptions in some of the northern cities, are what we would describe as Mexican or Spanish or Hispanic. So the conflict there would be between people who might be 35% of pure Inca extraction and people who might be 70% of Inca extraction. Similarly, if you go to Brazil, certainly to Rio or any of the great cities on business, everyone's black. I mean, like they would go from, there's some white, there are some people that are as Caucasian looking as people in Mexico. And there are some people that look like me. And both of those groups of people are slightly more likely than average to be rich. And from there, you go through every possible human variation, many quite lovely, until you get to a lot of people that look like Daniel. A slightly lower, but also high percentage of whom are also fairly wealthy. I mean, so you can definitely say, well, they have that conflict between what they call, say, güero y negro. But I mean, all of those people would strike us as Mexican. Just as, and I actually wouldn't be surprised if we got to something like that in the USA in 100 years, where you're now seeing, for example, I made the joke, but something that full-size school districts are doing of saying, well, they could just treat the Asians and West Africans as white. But there are multiple educational institutions that have done that. So, I mean, after 100 years, a century, will you have a white group that's, 5% West African, 5% Sephardic Jewish heritage, 10% Asian, at least, probably more than that, given the pattern of relationships, but, would identify as white, and then a black group that in fact would be 50% Latino or something like that, but would identify as black, maybe, because these labels don't have anything. Race exists in the sense that 23andMe haplotypical categories of regional variation exist. So you can debate this. I've debated this online with people like Kevin Bird that are in the genetics field, and they'll say, well, no, it doesn't. That's slightly different. But I can tell by taking a blood test, for example, that I am 40% WAB, West African Bantu. I am 40% specifically Northern Celtic European, and I'm 20% Plains Indian. So that's the extent to which race exists. But that brings up the question of, if your actual race is 40, 40, 20, which race are you in conventional terms? And in reality, I suppose I'd probably be accepted by the black team or the white team. Like, I don't really care. I describe myself as mixed. I guess I would say black if I were filling out a small business loan application. But these are the actual things that we see in modern America. Like, all of your points are good, but to say we should recognize our heritage or something like that, well, what is that by this point?
I'll give you an example. Let's say you have Hannibal, who was the African kid who was adopted by Peter the Great. I mean, maybe he did more things than... Well, I'm not going to get into that part of it. But anyway, he was adopted by Peter the Great, and Peter the Great raised him to, learn multiple languages, and he had occupied a high position within the Russian government at that time. And his great-grandson was Alexander Pushkin. So if you were to ask me, what culture does Alexander Pushkin, who was, partly black and partly of a Russian extraction, belong to, I would say definitely Russian. Not only that, but he was the guy who modernized the Russian language to what we know it to be today. So he was able to seek out a particular culture that he wanted to be a part of, he wanted to contribute towards, but he wasn't an empty consumerist. And that brings me again to the original question, which I don't think we got into that much, which is, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now that we have all of these interconnected advertising networks that drag people into them in this modern condition, where people don't really have time to, let alone read somebody like Pushkin, to do something that would...
But one last point about race, like when class, I know it's like a quasi-Marxist point, but wouldn't class play an issue? Wouldn't they say that you, as a tenured professor, are somewhat more white presenting than... It's sort of like, to the wokes, it like negates your African American or indigenous heritage, that you are in fact a white person, more or less, essentially, because of your class position or your academic position.
Well, I would say they'll classify him as white because of his ideological position.
Oh yeah, that too. That's
because what we fail to recognize again and again is that these critical race theorists, when you refer to whiteness and blackness, it transcends skin color, right? And so, at school, I would probably be called white just because I'm center right, and I believe more in liberalism rather than the woke ideology that we have today. And so I guess when it comes to Wilfred, yeah, he may be 40% black, but because he, I guess, so he has internalized the white portion of his heritage, or of the white portion, then I guess it will be more it'll be better if they call them white.
We're both wearing the polo blazer of oppression. I mean, the whole thing. My point, though, is just not to be crude, but this is all silly bullshit. Not you guys' analysis of it, which is excellent, but just this basic idea. Obviously, if being black means anything, it means being more than whatever percent of West African Bantu descent. I'd say half or close, whatever I am. I mean, that is what being black is. You can't point to a Chinese guy and say, well, he's black. Look, he's one of the best known hip hop artists in his region of Busan. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So the real question that we're getting to, I think, is does America still have a culture that we have the confidence to transmit that can allow us to welcome in immigrants of different racial and class backgrounds? I'd say in practice, the answer is yes. There's an attempt to make this not the case from a loud chunk of the intellectual class. But I mean, when I just said, like, two of the guys in the conversation, both of them are black, are wearing the same brand of blazer, at least it looks like it. Like, that is, American culture is extremely immediately recognizable to anyone when you travel overseas as an American. I don't think a single Russian or Japanese or Frenchman would dispute that. Like, what are some components of it? I mean, the Christian religion, at least as a baseline, was mentioned. Rates are slightly declining, but well over roughly 2/3 of Americans identify as having a single faith tradition. Dress and mannerisms. There's a very recognizable American style as versus the tighter European look. More importantly, language. I mean, virtually every member of the American middle and upper middle class speaks fluent English with a U.S. accent. Laws. I think we all might criticize Me Too for going too far, but I mean, you can't behave with women as you would in either Brazil or Saudi Arabia in very different directions. There's a whole set of cultural norms that grow up around our attitude toward drugs, public sex, dueling, a whole bunch of things that have been legal in many societies and aren't or regulated here. There's the US college system where if you're in the top half of the population, frankly, you're going to attend one of these institutions and learn about a whole bunch of things from wokeness, hopefully as a critic, to, what RAs are. I mean, I don't think it's very hard at all to identify an American. So, I mean, I think that the goal would be to take people in the immigration pipeline that are fairly high performing and then teach them to be Americans in this sense. And it's, easier said than done. But
my personal concern is a lot of these things, I'm sure that they're great and people enjoy them. To me personally, though, my feeling is that it may be too surface level as far as the kind of things that you're talking about here.
Wouldn't you say that, to make a spicier point, that a lot of these things that we refer to, let's say the Anglosphere, right? Whether this is America, I mean, Americans don't like to think of themselves, but it's true, the Anglosphere, that they largely come from traditions that were born and bred by Europeans. Germanic, Anglo, some Mediterranean, some Hellenistic, but largely that these are a product of European traditions, and that for people to come here, maybe on a smaller level would be all right, but after a certain threshold, they tend to not have the same cultural or genetic or what have you memory of these ways of doing things that we, like, by and large take for granted. I mean, again, that's like what Jared Taylor was arguing, more or less. But
no, but still, I would include somebody like Pushkin as being a contributor to those same qualities, which I see fading away.
But I'm talking about as large haplogroups. Let's just say and the term of like civilization, right?
Well, I think that rests on that argument, which I've heard and which can be intelligent, rests on the utilization of categories that didn't exist for most of history. So, I mean, when you say, like, people who recognize themselves as white Europeans or something like that created most of the framework for America, I would say that's not really true. I mean, I would say that English people, maybe Germans and Roman Italians, if you want to go back in history, created most of the institutional ideological framework for the West. I would say that compared to Blacks or Mexicans, Serbians, great people, but have contributed almost nothing to the logistical structure of the USA. And the reason I phrased it that way is that I think when you say something like that, like the damn Bosnians have contributed nothing, it just sounds kind of bigoted and silly, because the understanding is that a person from Bosnia would fall into many categories. They'd be a European, they'd be a human, they'd be un-American. But the reality is that we haven't gotten a lot from that region of the world. The reason that a Bosnian guy would feel comfortable criticizing an upper middle class black guy for his contribution is that the Bosnian guy would now be seen as part of the larger white category. But the majority of those white groups, the Portuguese, almost anyone from the Iberian Peninsula in North America, Hungarians, great people, and met a lot of them in the nightlife scene in Chicago, Polish Americans, but they're not really responsible for the founding traditions. There's a few exceptions like Kazimierz Pulaski of the country. I would say that as long as we have a confident idea of national identity, and if you want to go to a deeper level, most Americans in the middle class can still recite a great deal of what's in the Constitution. Everyone should be forced to, by the way. But the national founding principles, we're the first democracy, we're the destination democracy that accepts immigrants, we're the integrated democracy, so long as everybody performs. We're willing to keep that going. So on down the line. I think that Americans who learn those things tend to function pretty well. Like if you just pull up the Wikipedia list of immigrant groups by virtually anything, income, arrest rate, so on down the line, a great number of both white and black immigrant groups outperform both white and black Americans.
Oh, by the way, real quick, Hans says, who is Nikola Tesla? Good point, Hans. We can't forget about Tesla.
Well, plus, Philip said that Serbs were under the occupation of the Ottomans at that point. Yeah, that is, there was the Janissaries.
What about Turks then? That would include everybody, people of any sort of former Turkish subject race or Turks themselves. How many?
Well, do you count Mount Ararat, where supposedly, Noah came? Okay, I'm not going to get into that.
No holy, no biblical. But again, the question is, what are you talking about? So, it would be absolutely correct to say that.
Let's just say Anglo-Germanic is the founding stock of America. That's as we know America today.
Yes, and now is about 24% of the population, right? Like pure Anglo-German. So. This is what I'm saying. I'm actually going to shut up because a lot of the other guys have had excellent points. I've been talking a bit during the sequence, but just as a quick comment, there's a weird idea that people can't learn from one another. Like when you talk about culturalism online, you're almost certain to get from both the alt-right and the CRT boys, where does culture come from? With the implication being either direct genetic lineage or racism. But the idea is the reality is that that's stupid. There's no other way to put it. Culture, the transmission of basic cultural mimetic tropes. For example, everyone in the world uses gunpowder, and for that matter, sex toys that come from the Chinese. Everyone in the world uses the superior printing presses and structure of written alphabets that come from the Westerners. Everyone in the world uses, for example, coffee that comes from Ethiopia originally, cafe. Everyone uses a British, not white, not black, system of organizing educational classrooms. Blah, blah, blah. But the point is that if someone comes in and they're a Nigerian lord and you say, well, to enter this country, you're going to have to accept certain attitudes toward women and you're going to have to study for this many years, accept the Constitution. And they say, okay, I don't think that guy is going to make dramatically more or less of an impact on the country than a Turk or a Magyar who's confronted with the same question. And it's totally fair to say that neither Nigerians nor Magyars have prior to 1960 contributed much of anything to the USA. That's because there weren't any here. This gets back into these sort of online debates about whose ancestors invented the pig. I once spent a day in a conversation this is one of the reasons I got off social media to the extent I used to be on it. But I once spent a day in an argument with a bunch of West Africans, Chinese people, steppe Europeans, I guess, and Indians about whose ancestors invented certain breeds of cows. And at first it was fun, but then it was just this is asinine. Who the hell cares? Yeah. And I guess that's the question. Do you respect the other man's dairy herd today? Sort of is the question. Are you able to come into the USA and behave as a citizen? Of course, Germans contributed more to the USA historically than either West Africa. Well,
yeah. Well, if you count NASA, they've recently contributed as well. But that is one of those things that we don't really talk about that much. Operation Paperclip.
Brought a bunch of defeated Nazis over here. And as long as they remembered they were defeated permanently, I don't have an extraordinary amount of trouble with that.
Yeah. Then there's Operation High Jump, but okay. Anyway, when it comes to this notion, I agree with you. I think that if we have an open door policy and keep the, keep the standard incredibly high for the kind of people we want to come over here regardless of where they're from, I don't think there's a problem. My concern with the notion that we can keep the standard high, I don't think we are keeping the standard high. So I want to get also to Auron and Daniel as well. Do you think that there would be any way to keep the standard high or not?
Sorry, are you going to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No.
Well,
and
I would
and-
say, well, first of all, I would like.
Ooh, Daniel, I think you froze right now. So, Auron, can you hear me? Let's go Auron
Yes.
first and then Daniel.
Okay. I think that it's pretty clear, like it's about as clear as possible that the standard is not high and is not going to.
Comment first.
Wait, hold on, Daniel, I'm sorry, your internet connection is not great right now. So just wait a second. We're gonna wait for your internet connection to get back to normal, and then we are going to continue with your audio. But first, let Auron say, and then we're gonna get back to you because your internet's a little bit jumbled right now. So, Auron, go for it.
Yeah. Like I said, as I pointed out originally, I would reject the idea that, again, designing your polity on a spreadsheet for particularly efficient factors is a good way to build your country anyway. But even if you were going to do that, it's very clear that we are not, and there's no political will or ability to do that, right? Like, you can't even stop the current administration from busing immigrants into random parts of the country, and so the idea that we're going to suddenly lock everything down and have really high merit-based immigration is basically as comical as people on the alt-right saying we're going to have an ethno state. Like, neither of those are politically achievable at the moment, and can't be with the way things are structured. So even if this was the way in which you should manage your immigration policy, we all know it's not going to be. And so the question is, then what do we do, right? Because we know that there's just too much advantage to leaving the immigration policy as it is. And we already know that there is basically no way in which the immigration policy that Wilfred is explaining will be enforced by either side, by the way. The Republicans have no interest in the policy he's talking about either, even though their base does. And so while maybe that is a better way to manage it, even though I don't think it's the optimal way to manage it, either way, we're talking about a policy that we know from experience is not going to actually be enforced.
And Wilfred, I know that you have to go really soon, so I would love a response about that as well.
There was actually a viral video that was that went viral recently it was a Louis Theroux documentary, and he asked the South African farmer, he goes, "Why are you racist?" He goes, "Yeah, of course I'm a racist." And then he said, "But yet you're breaking bread with black people." He goes, "Yeah, I'm racist because they're racist too." So it's like that. It's funny how.
No, but again, like Gio, those people.
Well, races get along together. It's just
but they're not.
They have to be racist.
But Gio, they're not at the let's say the top level of society where people who, let's say, engage in a certain occupation, go to the same college, whatever, they tend to break bread with each other, and they're not racist.
No, not really. I wouldn't say in modern American campuses, people are really breaking bread with each other.
True. Okay, fine. Good point. No, but you know what I mean, Gio. Just like in general, the elite or the upper middle class or middle class of the world, they don't have these kind of problems. We do find these problems in a lot of poorer areas. So, in general, that I see as a bigger problem. Like, how do we solve that issue? But anyway,
but that's what Auron was talking about, is that you're essentially dumping the problems of diversity on the lower classes, whether you're a lower class white or black or Hispanic person. That's, I think, this is the problem with the current American immigration system.
Yeah, well, Auron's point is that nothing could really be done about this because this is the nature of the machine right now. It's too powerful. Wilfred, I know you have to go really soon, but would you agree or disagree with that statement? And is there any hope? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel here?
Well, first of all, I mean, we're a democracy, so within 10 years, as a bunch of people, including some of the panelists here, discuss these issues, we're going to see attitudes change dramatically. I mean, most predictions in political science have either this happening or a war down the pipe, and I'm an optimist. But anyway, I mean, more seriously, though, I think that it's probably true. So, first of all, of the options available, merit logical immigration is clearly the best. I mean, when you say the USA has no chance of being an ethno state. there are 72, I believe, separate white and Latin groups in the USA. And if there were no blacks or Asians to spar with, those groups would rapidly move away from recognizing one another as being like brothers. I mean, there are a total of something like 90 ethnic groups in the USA. And by the way, I don't really think this is good or bad. It's rare among democracies, but it's a characteristic of very large societies to be at least somewhat diverse. If you look at the Roman Empire, Abbasid Caliphate, Mongol Empire, so on down like British Empire, the EU taken as a whole, the USSR. I mean, if you cover a lot of land, there are going to be a lot of different types of people living on it without being too glib. So I don't think that merit immigration is probably the best of the policies available. Someone could actually argue an ethno-state would be the second best of them, or almost on par with the first, which is not going to happen here. And yes, of course, the worst possible option would be taking very, very large numbers of non-assimilation willing immigrants from all around the world and just letting them into the country.
Is that the Matty Iglesias? Is that the Matty Iglesias approach?
Oh God, the Matty.
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, I do think that what we're doing now, we don't have a very good immigration policy right now. I don't know a single political scientist or police or military person at the officer level, anybody that's relating to this that necessarily thinks we do. The immigrants themselves, I'm sure, are solid guys, but mass immigration not focused on metrics like do we need X number of nurses and so on, even Canada and France do this, doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion. With that said, I do think empirically we're freaking out about a lot of this. Again, 70% of, to the extent you care about race at all, 70% of Hispanic immigrants are Caucasian. I would assume within 2 to 3 generations, they're going to continue identifying 70% as white, which is what third generation Mexicans in the USA do. So we're dealing with flexible categories that change very rapidly over time. We're not going to see a race war in 50 years. We're going to see a lot more whites having noticeable brown skin and IQ scores and so on, pretty similar to what we see in the South today. Like, I tend to have a glib view of a lot of this because you see it over the sphere of the world in that discipline of politics. As to the question of can we change our immigration policy, not yet. But the last line I'm gonna give here, when you say, well, Reilly, you talking about everyone doing some basic military style training together and then the races getting along, are you saying merit immigration? That's a pipe dream. It's also a pipe dream that we become an 8 million person country composed entirely of Norwegians. I mean, we're one of the powers in the world. We're the Rome of the moment. I mean, our immigration policy, asinine as it is something that's been worked out through weeks of debate, and our government's probably not going anywhere for a while. The question, I guess, is how you change the society we have now or something like that. Perfect immigration policy will never happen. Neither will an ethno-state. What can we do to improve the country we live in now, I think is a valid question. I do think there's an American culture. I think Americans should transmit it to immigrants. And there are some ways, although not brilliantly effective ones, that we can get politicians to do that. And that's where we stand right now. It's an unsatisfying but honest, I guess, final point.
Well, one quick thing, Daniel, since his internet cut out, I really want to hear just like one last question if he has any to you. But also I want to say, I think a big quality of humans that separate us, let's say, from the lions and the bears, is that we have forethought. We have this, there's this idea of Prometheus, the god Prometheus who created human beings. The word Prometheans means forethought. And I think that is what enabled us to build the society that we have right now. And I hope that is something that we can encourage within people. That was just one quick thing I wanted to say. But Daniel, any question, comment, anything to Wilfred, because he has to go soon?
Well, I don't necessarily have any questions per se, probably only like a few ones about maybe college, just because personally for me, I'm going through the college process. But I would like to make a comment though. Right. I really don't think that having immigrants, especially those who are very competent, assimilating to I don't think it will be a huge problem for the United States because, well, first of all, the way the United States works culturally is, yes, we do have an American culture, but there's like an absolutist layer and a relative layer, and the relative layer almost acts as a release valve that stops any real conflict from happening. And so in a more absolutist layer, you have the more philosophical tenets about, liberalism, treating everybody with respect, stuff like that. That's almost like the glue that keeps all these, like, what you would say, like, different cultures together. But even when we say we're a multicultural democracy, to how far does each different culture go? I mean, the most it goes is like different food, like you go to a restaurant, you can go to a Jamaican food restaurant, and then you can go to get Italian food. The philosophical tenets of a certain culture, whether it would be, maybe the tenets of Eastern, of the East, where we're talking about Japan or whatever, and maybe the philosophical tenets of people in West Africa. Those tenets are, we tell them to shed those tenets when they come here, like the way they treat women or what they specifically treat their children. We tell them to shed those tenets. They come here, and they embrace American culture, because now that they've shedded those other philosophical tenets and embrace ours, a more religious, and they adopt a more religious framework, a framework that has a Protestant work ethic, et cetera, et cetera. What is really left in this multicultural democracy is really just very like surface level things like food or what they watch and things like that. But really, there is an American culture, and I don't think having really highly competent immigrants come over here, I don't think that would that wouldn't hurt America at all. If anything, those highly competent immigrants know in the back of their heads that quick assimilation will be best in order for them to make connections and to be highly successful in America.
I definitely hope so. Well, Wilfred, thank you so much for your time. It was a great pleasure to speak with you.
Great meeting all of you. And I largely agree with Daniel on that last point. That one sentence, that's the traditional idea of the melting pot, right? Like, you come into the culture, you have to accept the culture, but you're allowed, frankly, to contribute a couple of things. So, I mean, thus pizza is the most American of foods and so on. We've had a long tradition of assimilation of first non-German, non-Anglo white ethnic groups, now of the large minority, although I don't know how practical that term is if you're describing Caucasian, Hispanics, or East Asians, but ethnic groups. The only question, the biggest question, I think, is whether we'll have enough confidence in our own civilization to keep that process of assimilation going. If so, we'll succeed. On that note.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. On that note. So thank you very much for Wilfred for being here. You'll have to excuse me. I'm going to be right back. But let's keep this conversation going for a little bit. Thoughts on the conversation, and let's go from there.
Well, I think as like this idea that, well, and I've seen this question in the chat, and I guess it refers to maybe like, oh, like we might. Well, whites have to advocate for their racial identity because of this like looming threat of a potential race war in the future. I honestly don't think, well, I don't think it will happen as long as people have the ability to really voice their opinions on how they really think about people with other skin tones, skin colors. Because I mean, personally for me, and I like, I guess we like Gio, Lev, we spend a lot of time in the political sphere. We're like on Twitter a lot, things like that. But really, when I talk to people in real life, people really do still subscribe to the more liberal, just treat others the way you want to be treated sort of mindset. And I guess the left's very quick move towards this, I guess, absolutist white hating bigotry will not really taste well in the mouths of many, no matter what skin color they do have. And so I really don't think there's an impending like race war or there won't be any real like conflicts between different cultures within the United States.
I don't know.
For me.
We'll see if there's another police shooting. We'll see.
Well, Auron, what do you think? And unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear everything that Daniel said, but I did hear the beginning and the end of it. So, Auron,
but there isn't an impending race war. If
any thoughts?
I mean, it's a lot of what we've heard, right? That if you just have kind of this civic idea of what America is, and you can be confident in it, then it'll be transmitted, and and everybody can kind of come in and adapt to it as long as you have people of high quality. As I pointed out, obviously we're so far away from his vision of kind of how immigration would work that it's as far away as any other system being kind of suggested. but I think we are also seeing the limits of exactly what he talked about there. We do see these things tearing at the seams. We do see that America is not fundamentally confident in its culture or its values. If it was, we wouldn't be in the moment we're having right now. We wouldn't have the riots. We wouldn't have the things being taught in public schools that are being taught there. We wouldn't have American athletes at the Olympics denigrating their society every moment a microphone is put in their face or a camera is placed on them. If we had those confidences, those things wouldn't be happening. And so we're having a debate about whether we can be confident about something we already see falling apart.
I forget who said it on Twitter. I think it was it that Wyatt thread? I think it was the Wyatt thread on the Beals girl. It's hard to tell with gymnasts. They all look. Tim Dillon had this joke that they're all, well, never mind. That like you basically, and first of all, I think Wyatt, he gets a lot of things wrong, but he's right in this. He said like basically you're telling largely like African Americans to like that America is this like evil, racist, oppressive country. And then when you expect them to defend on the world stage, which I think the Olympics is total bullshit. Nobody cares anymore. That you should expect them to like defend America by winning the gold. But is this Beals girl, is she really the best? Or is it just like they say she's the best? I don't know. I don't fucking care. But like
no, but even defining the best in physical activity, while I understand the ancient Greeks had, their whole sportsmanship and all that.
Well, all sports are just pro wrestling nowadays. Yeah, well, like pro wrestling is the most real sport.
I don't think it's that to me. And again, I'm not a big sports guy, so I may be completely off the mark here. But to me, I know that, let's say, a bear or a gorilla is much stronger, even like a little chimpanzee is much stronger than any of us. It'll be able to dominate all of us in terms of physical, in terms of physical strength. Same thing with other animals. The cheetah is going to be much faster than us, regardless of who was the fastest. The difference between us and the animals, though, like I said before, it's forethought. We're able to foresee certain outcomes and plan and construct, and that's how we have all these beautiful psychedelic looking structures everywhere. Like that is something that's a very human thing and something very special. And I think like if you were to ask me what is American culture, like there are various parts of the United States which have certain things being passed down to them, but I'd say that generally like American culture, just like any culture that finds it has this ability to foresee certain things and to create something beautiful from that foreseeing ability, that I think is the juice. That is the magical spark. I don't think it's that active right now, but maybe we're going through a small period of decline, as well as other periods of decline America's had before, like back during FDR's time. He was, if I'm not mistaken, pretty close to, going full commie. Am I wrong about that? I may not have my history in order here, Oren, so help me out here.
I'm not sure in what aspect I'm going to help you out there. Sorry, Lev. I have many things to say about FDR, almost none of them good.
That's what I mean. That's the point that I was bringing up, that we were facing a similar kind of situation back then when it came to, I mean, not only were we helping the Russians during World War II, which is, understandable and all that, but afterwards, I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't croaked. Like there were certain challenges that Americans faced, even if maybe you could say they dressed better, they had nicer looking hats. Some people say they would have, like the Soviets would have had a greater grip on American society if FDR lived, if it wasn't, because Truman, is despite what people like fucking, who's the guy? He's an amazing director, but he's like just, the third worldist lib, Oliver Stone.
Oh, I thought, that's who you're talking about.
Yeah. Like he said, because Henry Truman, which is kind of true. He was like a middling possession. He was like a son of a haberdasher and all that. But I think he did do an important role in sort of stabilizing the European situation. I mean, I personally like Patton's idea. I think we should rounded up all of the German army, went after the Soviets, sort of let some things the Germans did slide. Don't make of that what you will.
Jesus Christ, Gio. Wait, no.
Kidding.
But did Patton say...
Patton's idea was objectively better than what happened.
I mean,
in my
look, I
opinion.
know I probably wouldn't have been around, but I
It was
would.
because of fucking FDR. They murdered. Okay, they assassinated Patton. That's by position.
Yes.
Because he was too based, too red pilled. They had to get rid of him.
Geo woke on the patent question.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just so suspicious. The fucking car crash. Come on.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Just like the modern day, what's his name? That journalist guy?
Not Pat Tillman.
No.
Seth Rich.
No, not Seth Rich.
There was Gary Webb.
No, not Gary Webb.
There's so many journalists. There's so many journalists they murdered. I can't believe it.
No, Gio, not in comparison to Russia. I know. Oh my God, Love's talking about Russia again. I'll stop. I'm not going to subject you to that.
Well, did you see my tweet today?
Don't worry.
Which I want to talk to Auron about. This is a good segue. The tweet today, I said, well, basically, FDR let his pal Uncle Joe totally eviscerate Eastern Europe. And now the same journalists, some of which, like Matty Iglesias, work for the New York Times, who had journalists that basically were an agent of Joseph Stalin, criticize Hungary and Eastern Europe in particular. Hungary and Eastern Europe. And it's so ridiculous to me how they're propping up this, like, what was the one tweet? I forget who was it from. I retweeted about they're doing this like Ron Swanson, Epic Bacon, like fuck yeah, America, America. And now it's like we're the greatest. The left is now going, we're the greatest country in the world because we got freedom against their right-wing enemy in Hungary with Orban. So, and then this fucking lawyer, the bug man, saying like, oh, everything that Orban stands for is against the Constitution. So you see that right away, America, in terms of its identity and its liberal framework, can easily be co-opted by the left. And for them to say that, well, no, actually, the progressive Wilsonian version of America, that is the real America. And I know I'm bringing up like, ANCAP, like Thomas Wood's points here, but it's true. Like they really have just totally like done away with any like Jeffersonian, like yeoman ideal
and
of
again,
America.
Gio, my I'd say more nuanced take is I'm not going to be one of those people who says that just because there are bad things in the United States, then the other people are all good.
Well, I laid it up for you, Lev. I mean, you're the one that believes in the reds, like, like the Stalin did everything, the Russians did everything. The Stalin was manufacturing reality. I mean,
yeah.
So I'm giving it to you, Lev.
And,
I don't know what
the organization of the KGB that was produced from the NKVD during Stalin's time. By the way, an interesting side note there is that when Khrushchev got into power, it was intentionally made that the KGB and the in Russian it's called the KPSS, which is the Communist Party of Russia, that those two competed with each other and neither one had ultimate power. And that was a very interesting kind of like a Soviet-style balance of powers that existed just because they saw the fuckery that Stalin was doing back then, and they were like, no more of that shit. Because what Stalin used to do, by the way, he used to have people that got into positions of power around him, and then he would just like slice a layer off, like every now and then. So anybody who came up to working for Stalin, eventually they'd be assassinated. And just like everybody, just like all at once, just like new layer. And you gotta admit that it may have been effective for preventing people from going against him, but also I wonder, like people say that maybe Stalin was assassinated. What I wonder though is whether it was not the fact that a lot of the people who were seeing Stalin, back in his room, that they were so scared of Stalin, neither one of them wanted to go into that room. And you would think like, shit, if Stalin is lying in ill health, they could have just like gathered together and just like assassinated him all at once, everybody stabbing a knife in. But they didn't. They were too fucking scared. Because I think that's how much fear Stalin was able to generate in his subordinates, just because he did that whole layering thing. And the problem is that people couldn't even say no, like in terms of getting hired to a position. So if you were going to be promoted to a certain position within the government at that time, you'd know that it's about time to start writing your will out. You'd know that, you're probably going to be dead soon, but you can't say no either, because then you'd be dead as well. So just imagine that level of fear. That's what I mean. Like, people don't understand that level of fear and paranoia that existed in the USSR in comparison to what we've got here. It's not even close.
What do you think it would take or what would be the left's tactic to make the paranoia comparable between the USSR at that point and the United States today?
We'll see.
Or is it even possible?
I mean, I think it's still despite all the things that are going on right now, it's still very far. I mean, I want to have one last example for all the haters out there. One last example of what recently happened in Russia. Have you heard of this businessman named Michael Calvi? Oren, have you heard of this guy?
I cannot say that I have.
So Michael Calvi was this businessman who used to promote a lot of Russian business interests. He used to tell everybody, come on, invest in Russia, it's going to be great. And one day, some friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of Putin's decided that he wants to own Michael's company, just out of the blue. And they concocted some weird crime that they accused Michael of, despite Michael being their fucking cheerleader for years and years. And now they're arresting him, and they put him on house arrest before, and they took away all of his assets. So that is also a difference where, yes, we could talk till the cows come home about certain people that have stood up against certain things that the government was doing, and they found themselves to be in a weird, a weird predicament afterwards here in the States. Absolutely, nobody's perfect. But that is a specific level. When you would have a businessman who, just like somebody who's, in good relations with the president wants to take your company away, and then they just frame you, and that's it. The company's not yours, and now you're going to jail. So that is another level that we're not at yet.
So I do have to go, but before I go, Lev, we have to get over this. All right, buddy? So you and me, we're going to work it out right now.
Yeah,
all right?
Here we go.
All right. So we have to stop pretending that the formal American government is the only government involved in what's happening in the country. Okay.
Mhm.
So one of the things that happens is you make the point that you just did, and you're correct. Like there's this obvious corruption where a friend of someone who holds formal government power suffers a consequence for disagreeing or having something, and the government uses its formal power to take that away. Like that's obviously an abuse of power, right? However, off the top of my head, I can name a number of major businessmen who stepped afoul of the American woke ideology and lost exactly the same things you're talking about. Now, they didn't go, you're right, to house arrest, maybe. They might have protesters outside
and now
of their
he's
homes.
being arrested permanently, not just house arrest.
But you stay with me here.
Okay.
So there are
Probably deserved it.
There are plenty of business owners who have lost their livelihood, lost their control over their company.
Mozilla guy.
Yeah, Mozilla, Papa John's guy, right? Like there are many different
Coinbase.
people we can point to. We can point to people who are specifically under political prosecution. Ricky Vaughn, right? Like journalists who are under prosecution for no other reason than trumped up charges because they ran afoul of administrations. Pretending that just because you don't actually have like official stormtroopers coming through your window, we are not on this path or relatively far down it, is a mistake. People's bank accounts are getting closed. Their ability to process payments are closed. We're moving towards an all digital economy. Really, how far do you think we are from this stuff?
PayPal is going to give all information to the ADL, by the way.
The ADL.
Yes.
And weren't they already working with the Southern Poverty
Law Center? Yes.
Yeah.
These people are going to send out private companies, I'm scare quoting really hard here, after you to shut you down. If you don't think that and the news media has already started doing this, if you don't think that the media is not going to be sending out economic assassination squads to every single person who runs for local school board in opposition to CRT, you have just not been paying attention to what is happening in this country.
Facebook already in compliance with working with people like Jared Holt, by the way. Oh, should I mention his name? Oh, going to banned on YouTube. But yes, this is true. They work with a bunch of groups. Hope Not Hate is one of them.
And the Biden administration has already said on obviously the pandemic related stuff that they are working directly with these social media groups. It is we are only one.
The messages that have the exact same wording that, oh, we're full in the IC. Never mind. I'm not going to say it.
I just want to make sure with one of those examples, for example, like with Papa John, were his assets seized as well? or no?
Like
in
obviously,
class action shit, yes, his assets are going to be. Sorry, Auron. Sorry.
yeah, no, I mean, Gio's right. Like I said, the problem, Lev, is you are right that there is not direct, complete, formal imposition of this stuff yet. But if you are waiting for that and you're just saying that that alone is the only indicator, or that is when you need to trip the lever and say things aren't working, I think you are really mistaken. You have to understand that the reason that the American version of the managerial society outlived the Soviet version is that it was better at this kind of thing. It was better at soft power, so it was less obvious, and it won in over the long run. But it is still extremely dangerous, and it will continue to use these non-formal governmental methods to crack down in very similar ways. No, you won't be rotting in a prison. You'll just be unemployable. No one will look at you. You'll be depersoned. You'll be untouchable. You can say that that's a better situation, I guess, but not by much. And it's not anything that we should be looking forward to.
Alexei de Tocqueville did talk about this, and I believe it was Democracy in America. He did say that if America was facing something more authoritarian, then it wouldn't happen from government straight down. I mean, that's way too ineffective. It would take a long time, and there would definitely be a backlash to it. I mean, we're already seeing the backlash from the ordinary Americans. We're seeing a backlash against leftist policies imposed by the government, by ordinary Americans. And so trying to implement power through the government is an extraordinarily inefficient thing. And so obviously, yes, the next big thing is culture and using these big corporations. And so again, like Alex de Tocqueville said, in America is a special situation. Instead of locking you in a prison, they'll just stop talking to you. You know, you'll be unemployable. You're gonna rot in your house, unable to feed your children. Your friends will outcast you, and I would say, in a way, that's even worse than being in solitary confinement. If you're unable to feed and provide for your family, if none of your friends will talk to you for fear of being canceled as well, that's pretty bad in itself as well.
Absolutely. No, Auron, I don't know if you assume that I portray this very sunny side of the United States as opposed to the dark side of Russia. I hope you know me better than that. My whole thing, the reason why I mention Russia, it's not that I don't deny exactly what you said, all these problems. I mean, that's why we do this show. You know, I don't live in Russia. I live here in the States. And the reason why we do this show, why we try to bring people who are within this other sphere together with people like yourself, is specifically because I'm very concerned about these problems. The reason why I bring up Russia, though, has more to do with what the proposed solutions people have to the problems at hand, where I'm very much against a dictatorship, totalitarianism, and I try to list certain things that end up happening under that system just as a sign that I really disagree that the implementation, if there was implementation of a system that's going to replace the one we're currently in right now to a certain extent, why I would be against that one. So in a way, trying to steer people away from that point, that's literally the only reason why I bring these things having to do with Russia up. It has nothing to do with, thinking that it's all sunshine and butterflies here.
I honestly think it's impossible. I disagree with them because a lot of people make this contention and they say that, well, at some point we're going to have to make our own institutions and then those institutions will fight. I think that in certain cases it's impossible to make your own version of something in an economy. I mean, we've seen it with Parler, by the way, just because our tech overlords are so great that are so big that Parler, even having huge success, Amazon was able to take it off web services, and I believe Apple and Google took it off their app stores. And so I don't think making two different institutions or two different versions of a similar product and then having them battle out in a free market economy would even work, because
we need a based corporation to promote a based Papa John's to
Don't get me started, Gio.
Honestly, at this point, we have to fight within the institutions that already exist. And this is the problem with a lot of people, or I wouldn't even just say conservatives, but people who realize what is going on. They would watch the YouTube videos or whatever and say, oh, look at what's going on at Coca-Cola. Look at this seminar saying that white people are, what did it say specifically?
This Chris Rufo thread about what they're doing.
Yeah, like we can only have so many Christopher Rufos telling us what's going on. I mean, like we need more people actually going into these institutions and actually trying to change it back to normal. That's how the left didn't win, or they aren't winning right now by saying, oh, like I'm just gonna make my own Apple company, and then that Apple company will.
But how it works, Daniel? I'll tell you how it works. And Auron, you have a video, the more recent one, The Family Against the Total State, but also like The Secret American Constitution. That was another one. But I'll tell Lev, here's about business. Okay. So the reason I'm reminded of this is because I just came across this excellent Logo Atlas tweet. Where
he's coming on the show this Tuesday with Amy Therese. Yeah.
It's a picture of fucking Cushbomb, Matt Kreisman, who's the leader of Chapo Trap House. Humongous close up of his cuck face. Maybe if I take my thing on, I'll have the scraggly, like you could see his fucking molars. And it says, and quote, you're just jealous of my privileged position in the false consciousness production industry, you peasant fetishizer. I can't wait for the lumpen masses to expropriate your small business so I can be bought at ground zero prices by BlackRock. Meaning that, and so then he says a picture of Mao with the peasants saying when the Chapo left calls someone a peasant, you know what they mean, meaning they're going to liquidate them. So the way it works is that what happens is the political left will make cover. Oh my God, Lev! Oh my God!
This is me as the female school teacher that was pointed out by one of the people in the chat here. That is
the
my
female.
View. Yeah,
yeah. So
not a bad looking teacher, is it? And by the way,
you kind of look like one teacher I had. But anyways, so what they do is they'll give like Chapo ironist / like depending on who they are. If it's like Carl Beezer, or if it's like fucking Cushbomb, they'll give like a particular flavor of dirtbag left justification. But if it's a woke person like Kendi or whoever, they'll do this too. What they do is that it's a reciprocal relationship between the neoliberals, the neocons, and them. So what they do is that they'll take a business that's evil, terrible corporation that if this was in the 1990s with the anti-globalization movement, like for example, in the battle for Seattle, what they'll do is that they'll give like cover. They'll give like left cover to these corporations because in a way, not only are they immune from it because they're all upper class rich kids, fail sons, ironically enough, but they'll make some elaborate theory cell justification as to why BlackRock is good for basically destroying the lower middle class people from having families and owning their own homes and so forth, because they'll say that, well, everyone should be in a pod city anyways. It's better for the environment. And also you're evil, racist, terrible. And oh, by the way, it's oppressing people that are our political enemies who are like, let's face it, the people that are selling their homes to BlackRock are boomer parents that are going to condos, moving to Florida, that are disenfranchising their like lower class white kid, millennials, Gen Xers, millennials and Zoomers who would have had a family in one of these starter homes. So this is why they're good with corporations that are totally against traditional leftist, quote unquote, leftist causes, because that's the way it works. They're punishing the class of people, largely lower class white people that they hate, that they want to, the kulaks they want to liquidate. And by doing so, Matty Iglesias is the master of this. He's the absolute king of giving left justification for neoliberal exploitive business practices, because he's saying, well, it's better to like clear the dead wood of the white working class when we could just import 1 million more Americans. And you better believe that they're going to be better Americans than the white people that are already here, largely, or white or Hispanic or whoever, right? So that's the way it works. That's the game. People like Matt Kreisman, people like Matty Iglesias, people like fucking Carl Beezer, people like even Ibram Kendi, they will give justification for woke capital to basically exploit the kulaks. Sorry, that was a long rant. That's actually be a clip right there for BTR. So, Oren and Daniel, what do you two think of that?
I do think you're correct, but I gotta get running. So
oh shit, sorry.
So,
Bro.
Yeah,
Oren,
no
thank
problem.
you so much for coming in. Let
Thank you, my friend.
me plug everything about you. So, for those who do not know Auron MacIntyre, please check him out on twitter.com/Auron MacIntyre, and of course the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Auron MacIntyre. And by the way, MacIntyre, that's Irish, right?
Yeah.
Scottish.
Scottish?
Oh, it's Irish?
No, I'm just messing.
Oh,
It's
shit.
it's a nom de plume, guys. Like I made it up.
All right.
That's not his real name.
I had a
That's,
teacher in a Catholic school named
obvious.
Mrs. McIntyre, although she wasn't the hot one. The hot one was Miss O'Shaughnessy, and let me see if I could find a picture of her to show you guys. I did a animation about a hamster who falls in love with this redheaded teacher based on her, so let me see if I can... And thank you so much for the $2 fight or flight. Really respect that. So, Auron, I know you have to go now, buddy, but again, thank you so much for being here, as always, and wishing you the very best with the years ahead and weeks and months and all that.
New video coming up? Or
I need to get one. I've got a couple things written, but nothing's in the pipeline yet. I'm supposed to be talking to Zero HP Lovecraft soon. Hopefully he'll be coming on soon here.
Write
He just
a
got
video.
done with his new work.
short
so he's
story,
gonna,
yeah.
so he's gonna join me to talk about that.
Nice.
Well, he writes a video. Me, I just like ramble for a minute and I schizo ramble and I edit it in post. I'm like,
I kind of do that. I make like notes and I like lecture and then cut
I'll
it.
do that.
Yeah. But
Tomorrow I have to work on. I'm gonna release the second part of my Book of Revelations reading, so I just have to draw the lamb cover image. So,
all right, guys. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank
thank you, Auron. Thank you.
Nice conversation
As always.
Absolutely, Daniel. And Daniel, I think we're going to be going soon, but I would love to plug your stuff as well. So where can people find you?
Oh yeah, my name is Daniel Idfresne. I am once again a very new person to the internet. That's why I'm not really a YouTube star. I don't know why you called me that at the beginning of the stream.
No, you will be a YouTube star. That's what I meant.
Well, I guess we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. But yeah, my name is Daniel Idfresne. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. All of them is my first name, last name. That is DanielIdfresne. You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. All of them newly created. And so if you would like to have content from a teenage free thinker, probably, want to watch a fresh mind on the recent topics and the stuff we're talking about today, then you can check those out. And I definitely can't wait to hop on again and talk about more things. I actually want to meet Amy Therese at some point.
Hell yeah.
That would be cool as well. So yeah, thank you for having me again. I didn't really get to talk as much as I wanted to today, but of course, I guess I'll have plenty more chances to enter more of my opinions into the debate. Yeah.
Absolutely, Daniel. So thank you very much, buddy. And by the way, I got new glasses, and I've been getting some compliments in the chat about them, and I do like them much better than those old dinky glasses that I had before.
Hey,
Oh
just
yeah,
the
you did get new
Trotsky
glasses.
beard.
Yeah.
He just has to
see.
grow the Trotsky Van Dyke.
Oh man,
That's the only-
almost there. We are almost. And by the way, see the Pitbull background that I have over here, Daniel. Your opinion on the Pitbull question?
The Pitbull question?
Yes.
Get rid of them all. Oh, sorry.
See.
Wait, about your background?
Yeah, well, not the background specifically, but there's a raging debate about pit bulls as far
It basically
as whether...
mirrors the race and IQ debate for some reason.
No, but with pit bulls, it's actually very specific that the pit bulls are...
Everyone I've ever seen with a pit bull has been an ignorant motherfucker, I gotta say. I don't mean to stereotype, but I just don't trust them.
That is sort of true. That is sort of true.
Yeah,
I
knew it.
I mean, people say, it's the owner,
think
not
if
the
you-
dog, but...
No, that's bullshit. They have a genetic predisposition. Well, it is the owner, but the problem with pit bulls is that they have a very particular. I think people have studied them. They have a very particular thing that makes them go off. I don't know. There are other dogs who are equal to them in strength and power, but who are very easy to manage as guard dogs and junkyard dogs. Like Doberman pinschers are very easy to train. Although I still probably wouldn't want to pincer around my kid or whatever. I don't have kids, but you know what I mean. Like various bloodhounds or various other guard dogs, very easy, German shepherds. Sorry, Daniel, you go ahead. Fuck, I can't.
Yeah, well, I don't really have a nuanced opinion on the pit bull, but I get from like first sight a lot of people that I know who are pit bull owners are I would say well, if you want to go with like the vibes equal vibes attract each other, I wouldn't say the most intellectual of my friends are those who have pit bulls, and so maybe that there's a correlation there somewhere. I don't know.
The worst are pit moms. Pit moms are the absolute worst. Actually, they always post, "I love my kids." Meanwhile, they're partying at the bar, or strippers. I don't want to denigrate pit moms, but I think the problem with pit moms is that they want a replacement for the masculine men. Yeah. They basically want a masculinity that they can control somewhat as a dog, but yet they want a dog who is assertive over them. And then I don't even want to get into the mimetic, erotic connotation. Never mind. I'm not.
Well, it turns out, by the way, that not the Greek lady, but another Naked News anchor was a pit mommy. Well, she had both pits and what's a Triumph the Insult comic? Rottweilers. So
yeah.
That was
Rottweilers. I think you can train better as guard dogs. I think, like with pincers. Yeah,
maybe, but they're still pretty
pit
aggressive.
Moms they're very aggressive. You wouldn't want them. Like they're sheepdogs a lot. Like they're any like type of farm dog you really want to be careful with. I mean, even if they're trained, because they can be quite aggressive. But like pit bulls, for some reason, they are particularly. They're a type of aggression that is unpredictable. That's their problem. So,
and Daniel, do you have any pets?
I actually do not. I think it's maybe a New York City thing. But a lot of New Yorkers actually have pets, though. I don't know. I personally,
I think you should get a cat just because I love my cat.
I am not a cat. person.
Why not?
No. I mean,
no, you're never coming on the show again. That's it. Yeah.
Well, I am more of a dog person. While in my New York City apartment, I do not have any pets. When I do, my parents and I do go to Haiti every 2 or so years to do missionary stuff, and we do have a ton of pets at our place in Haiti. And there, I like to hang around the dogs more than the.
Here's an image of a pit mom for those in the chat. Okay, imagine like a greasy bun with huge novelty glasses they got at a dollar store, and wearing sweat or track pants, or like wearing like pajama bottoms with like the halter top, and they're smoking Marlboros or Newports. Never mind. I'm that's total fucking stereotype, but they're always going Facebook. They're the ones that write the posts where they're beefing with someone, but like they don't say them by name. So they're just like randomly writing aggressive posts on Facebook. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I'm sorry. This is a stereotype.
I'm wondering now with all this,
fuck that bitch. I don't care about that bitch at the Safeway.
With all this conversation. Well, like I'm thinking, like with all this conversation about how cigarette smoking apparently keeps the Backstreet Boys at bay, from their world tour. I wonder, like, if are there kosher cigarettes? Are cigarettes kosher? Because if not, they should. Hold on.
Do they smoke in Israel?
Yeah, I mean they should.
Well,
I mean,
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, look, update. We have an update though on our everyone's favorite person. Chris Chan denied bond until next hearing in September. Yeah. Interrupted judge with the proper pronouns has to access his toys. Oh my god! So it's kind of like Bubbles, where he had Vince the Pince, the cat, in jail, but Chris Chan wants his toy. Chris Chan wants her toys in jail. So, oh man, Gio, you're too smart to have such ignorant opinions. Fuck off with that. Okay, I hate pit. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean fuck up. I'm very sorry, Free Spirit. I mean like, well, I think like in my experience with people who have owned pit bulls, haven't been very good. I know. I'm very sorry.
I'm just gonna say that I forgot it, but now I remembered it. I was just gonna
Pitbulls
say
are a racial filter.
I was just going to say that if we're going to have kosher cigarettes, you know what they should be called? They should be called Jewports.
Yeah, Rothman. Well, I guess Rothmans. That's no. I think like here's the thing: men will go for like middle range dogs, but women will go for like little toy micro poodles or like huge dogs that are just like horses, like Great Danes. Although I say Great Danes are pretty friendly though.
Wait, I think
if I were to have a dog, I'd have like a hunting dog, like a Springer Spaniel or something like that.
I think it was an Anna Karenina, but I could be wrong. There was, one of the guys, he saw this little lap dog on the lap of this lady in the train that was making too much noise.
Oh,
so he,
yeah.
Threw it out of the train.
Oh, that's terrible. That's like Only Use Me Blade fucking throwing the dog, or like that Alinity girl just fucking throwing her cat across the room. Pitbulls are being used as instruments or fancy. Yeah, that's the problem. I think that like a lot of people, like if you're gonna own a pet just as like a social signal thing. So okay, so here's the thing about Chris Chan.
Same thing with kids when they dress, like the celebrities.
Oh
yeah,
that's fucking stupid. Yeah. I hate that. Yeah, or people that like sports parents are the worst in my opinion. They fucking live vicariously through their kids. Consalvo said, I guess that's the attorney or the judge, said it's clear that people, and so this is Daddy Jim's Twitter account.
Hey guys, I do have to go in a bit.
Sorry.
So Daniel, before you go, any final thoughts on the conversation? Anything you would like to say? Go for it.
Well, I think it was a pretty interesting conversation on the topic of immigration. I there was a few things that I needed to be reminded of, like for example, the difference between ethnicity and race. I think that was a really great point by Wilfred, and I can't wait to use that when my progressive friends, or I wouldn't even say friends, but my progressive classmates in school in September starts talking about how America might turn into an ethno state because of these right wingers or whatever. But for the most part, yeah, I think it was a really, really productive conversation. I've learned a few things, and I have to go now because unfortunately it is college application season, and I got a ton of essays to write. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm a pretty.
Oh shit! You have to write essays.
Be sure to put break the rules in your. I'm
good. No, don't.
I'm pretty.
In Canada,
and that's the thing. Wait, no, that's the thing because like, there's a lot of I'm pretty like proactive with like I guess politics right now, and I have like a few like pieces on different newspapers and like I have a YouTube channel, stuff like that. And in a normal universe, in a normal country, it would be completely fine for me to put every single thing that I do on a college application, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah,
we don't have that in Canada, thank God. I'd fucking die if we had the SATs. Holy shit!
Oh yeah,
is that the SAT you're writing?
Yeah, the SAT. I have to take it again in August, and everybody fill up the August seats in New York City. So I have to go into New Jersey.
Do they have online now?
Oh, well, you gotta go to Jersey? The AP tests were online, and they made them ridiculously hard. But I still passed the ones I took. I took government and politics, and I took U.S. history. I passed those, but they made it extra hard for online. But there's no way they're doing the SAT online.
Why not? So, why can't they? Because like every major test,
cheating. I guess that they're afraid somebody.
But the SAT tests are online. I think it's just because the SATs maybe like they're darling, the golden boy of College Board.
I think it's bullshit. They say that it has no bearing on like later academic success either.
Oh no! It definitely does. There's this great piece by Freddie Dober. Yeah. Your score on the SAT is like heavily correlated with how well you do in the future. And as a matter of fact, a lot of liberals and progressives say that your SAT score is highly contingent on your socioeconomic status, but when it doesn't really hold the test. The SAT is actually, or rather essays are how well you do on an essay is more contingent on your socioeconomic status.
Yeah, because of time, the sheer time it takes to research.
Exactly. So this is another example of like progressives, completely messing up what they believe. And this is what's happening with the SAT and like the conversations about whether the SAT is racist or whatever naturally has gone into whether the SHSAT is racist. And in New York City, we have this thing called a specialized high school admissions test. It's sort of like the SAT for the best high schools and
to get into the higher bracket.
So I took the SHSAT. I did well, and I got into Brooklyn Technical High School. And I guess now people are trying to say that the SHSAT is racist because
but like I think the system is bullshit in general, like the whole standardized test thing. Like I think when it comes to like the humanities, I think they should have like an entry essay, which some colleges in Britain and Canada do. But the SATs just, I don't know, man. I don't know anything about it. I'm Canadian, so thank God we don't have that.
For specific colleges, if you want to enter in a certain program, like a humanities program, you have to do the SAT, yes, but you also do have to submit an essay. Like for example, for Princeton, Princeton, I think you have to submit 4 essays, and one of them a graded paper.
Unless you're Ahmed, what's his name, Zaid. We just said Black Lives Matter over and over again. That was.
Oh yes. Bro, I don't know how
I fucking hate that kid. He was the most annoying piece of shit. Oh my God.
One of my friends,
because he would say these stupid shit. Oh, you knew? Did you know about him or?
I didn't know about him until one of my friends who like is not even involved in politics at all. But he told me like, oh yeah, this kid like said BLM like 1,000 times, and he got into
that was
and then he's like, Daniel, you're black, you should like do that. I was like,
no, because it's kind of like Barnett Newman doing the strips on the painting. Like as soon as Melvick does the black canvas, no one else can do it.
Yes. Once he do it, I definitely get that.
But let me read you before you go. I want to read you this Chris Chan thing.
Oh God! Wait, Daniel, do you know who Chris Chan is?
Oh no! Don't ask
Wait, Christian who?
Chris Chan.
Christian Weston. Well, Christina Weston Chandler, but.
Oh man!
Wait, let me hear it.
Okay.
So I highly suggest when you're done your SATs to just before you have to go to class, just like waste all of your time watching the Geno Samuel documentary on Christian Weston Chandler and the deep lore. So this is what Consalvo said. So I'm guessing this is the judge. This is going to blow your mind.
And this is Chris Chan, by the way. As it used to be.
Yeah, this is from Daddy Jim, Mr. Medicare's Twitter account, Quarantine Coof. Consalvo said it's clear that people sought out where Chandler was staying at in the hotel, meaning Ethan Ralph and his trans girlfriend, fiance, whatever. They went and tried to confront Chris Chan. Hotel in Henrico and videotaped her arrest. So meaning Ethan Ralph. Chandler interrupted the proceedings, loudly saying, and I'm trying to do the Chris Chan voice, "I'm famous on the internet," before Hildeberg told her not to speak until spoken to by the court. So that is Chris Chan's defense. I'm famous on the internet, which it's true, but this kid, okay, Daniel, you're going to like totally regret ever hearing about the name Christine Weston Chandler. It's going to make your skin fucking crawl. It's going to be like you're a Zoomer, so you don't know what the internet was like back in the day. I know, I was there. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember the 4chan threads.
Lisa said, "Do you even know?" Well, I was in my defense. I'm like barely.
You don't
like,
say.
Don't say your age, please. No, just for YouTube reasons. But he is over the age of 13. Which matters on YouTube live streams.
Yes.
Put it that way.
Yes.
He is almost a year. He's barely legal.
I'm not only that, but like academic, like since I
can tell you probably don't have a lot of internet access, but
I do have a lot of internet access, but I usually most of it is cancer. I'd rather not be on like Twitter arguing with other people.
You know what I would love to see though? I would love to see.
I mean, like, I would love to see probably. Yeah, they probably don't want you.
I would love nothing more than to have a video of your father, Daniel, of your father watching the Chris Chan documentary and just commenting on what he's seeing.
Oh my God.
So it's like literally like the only way to say it is if it's like a living Truman Show, put it that way. It's like literally like this. No other person in human history has been documented to the exact day, there's whole people that follow Christian around. They're called the Chanologists, where they there's a whole Wikipedia called the CWC Sonichu, the Wikipedia, CWC Wikipedia, where they chronicle every little aspect of Christian's life from like 2006 till now, because there was a period where there was a hiatus, but like basically Christian, when he was because now became trans, documented everything through this like shitty PS2 camera and like texting people. And then there was a whole like bunch of trolls that so every event in Christian's life is broken up into what they call sagas, like the Scandinavian sagas, depending on different trolls that interacted with Chris, whatever. And there's like these elaborate backstories of like trolling and convincing. So basically Christian is an autistic who made this book called Sonichu, which is an appropriation of both Sonic and Pikachu. Yeah, and there's like Sonichu. This really weird like shitty art style and like really weird like sexual innuendos. And basically Christian would take like every single part of like kid shit culture when you're growing up as a millennial, like from Digimon, Pokemon, bronies, you name it, and would put it in the Sonichu comics. And like anytime Christine would have a hardship in their life, they would like basically write that into the comics. So for example, when at the time Christine got kicked out of the mall, he would like write in these mall cops as the jerk ops, or like and then what happened was, for example, on campus, went to this like community college, Chris at the time would wear a sign saying looking for a boyfriend free girl. That's what he calls it, or her. And would wear this sign like you have to be white, a non-smoker, all this shit. So naturally, like it would incur the ire of the administration. So the dean of the Piedmont, Virginia University was her name was Mary Lee Walsh. And so Chris Chan would write Mary Lee Walsh as a villain in the comic books.
God.
And there's this whole backstory with his parents were very old when they had him, her, whatever. And there's a whole backstory. And now Christine is going to jail for sexually molesting, should I even say on YouTube, his elderly, demented mother Barb. Because he thinks that there's multiple dimensions that he calls the dimensional merge, where every single cartoon like franchise is real and that Christine interacts with. And so Christine believes that Barb in another dimension is not her quote unquote mother. It's like this really weird convoluted bullshit. But basically there's like a history. It's like there's so much, I can't even describe it. I'm literally trying to tell this. Okay, I had a friend when I was in grad school and I was in my philosophy MA. His name is Bob. By the way, shout out to my friend Bob. He's on Twitter, Bob Smithers. And literally from the first hour we met, we talked about three things. We talked about Heidegger, Julius Evola, and after the first hour, I asked, I made a reference, do you know who Chris Chan is? Do you know who Kristen Weston Chandler is? And Bob said, no, I don't. And like literally for the next 5 hours in the grad room, I was describing to my friend Bob who Kristen Weston Chandler, Christine Weston Chandler is. And he's like, and near the end, he was like, Gio, I never have ever regretted asking someone a question in my life, but this is the first time I've ever regretted asking someone a question in my life. Who is CWC?
And Worm Hatcher writes in the chat, okay, I'm back from Holy Mass.
Oh no!
Well,
no, there's a bunch of like weird shit.
Probably go back there now.
Christine became famous because people discovered her on 4chan. And Opie, do you remember Opie and Anthony? Do you know Opie and Anthony?
Yeah.
Anthony Cumia?
Anthony Cumia. Radio duo.
Yeah, he's got a lot of sus things as well. But so back when they were together before Anthony became like more like on the right and like, Opie like left, they profiled Chris Chan at the time, Christine Chan, because Chris Chan believed in quote unquote recycling. So he believed every time you masturbated that you're losing your precious essence. So he would take orange Fanta. He would do it in a cup.
Oh my god!
And he would
Oh my
recycle.
Gio,
God.
please.
And they played the
No
video
more.
on
No
air
more.
of where he like went up to the camera and like, he would like, imagine if this glass wasn't coffee but was you know what.
Oh my God,
And he would
Gio,
put
stop.
orange Fanta.
This is it. This is the
Imagine
end.
my orange
This is the-
bubbly is orange
This is the end.
Fanta. Still
This
some
is
minute.
the end. Please.
And he was like, well, here it goes.
Oh my God.
This is the end. This is the end. My beautiful friend, the end. When you think of it, the song The End, I have a YouTube video, Giant Productions, youtube.com, where I go for 2 hours analyzing the song The End by The Doors. It's almost like the Odyssey of Chris Chan. That one part, he's like, he put his long boots on, he put his Sonic Shoe medallion on, and he went on down the hall. He said, Father, yes, I want to kill you. Because he ended up killing his father through neglect, by the way. He was an old man. Mother, I want to all night long. There you go. The End by The Doors is like the Odyssey of CWC. That is a clippable moment as well.
Well, Daniel,
I'm sorry.
Daniel-
You're never going to pass your fucking SAT because now you're thinking about, oh my God, who the fuck is Christian Weston Chandler?
Yeah, I'm just like,
And by the way, see
I
this
totally fucked your academic future because now the fucking brainworm of CWC has entered your soul.
and see this old lady. So
This is why we gotta get Tim Dillon on.
Okay,
I'm
this
gonna
old
rival.
lady-
Imagine me and Tim Dillon,
Oh,
two
God.
fucking fat asses, just going up, just jiving.
By the way, Daniel, this old lady here, this is Mary Lee Walsh. This is the
Yeah.
school person who took down this boy.
Show him the cartoon of Mary Lee Walsh.
boyfriend. I will.
How Christian
hold on.
drew her.
So this is how
Oh.
Christian drew her. But
Yeah.
then somebody ended up drawing her as the sexy-looking succubus. So this is
oh my
what
god!
she ended up being like. So
And there was a guy from Newgrounds who ended up animating the life of Christine Weston.
Yes.
Show
Fast
Daniel
kid.
the letter, the requirements to be Chris Chan's boyfriend free girl.
All right. Well,
Show
I
him,
gotta
show him, show
I
him.
gotta scroll up there. Gio,
Okay, put it on
what-
pin. Put it on twin.
what are you
pin.
doing? What are you doing to us? All
Okay,
right.
put it on pin. So single cutie, 18 to 21, female. What does it say? Female companion. Any men not allowed. No damn. He used to call them damn dirty homos because here's the thing. Christine always hated men from the very beginning because of very like disruptive social formations or lack thereof. So she tried to find a way to hate men, but also be a creep towards women. So I shit you not, Christine Chandler became a male lesbian therefore Christine equates homosexuality with being like ultra masculine because there's no women involved. And so then later on, when a bunch of woke people, like woke Zoomers, discovered Christine Weston Chandler, then she had to like begrudgingly apologize for being homophobic. So basically, she would hand out these pamphlets that said you had to be white, you had to be between 18 and 21, you have to be a non-smoker, you can't be a black person, like a black woman, you can't be a damn dirty homo, and you I think like another one was like you had to like know what fucking Pokemon was or some shit like that. Like it was really like this list of like this personal ad that he put on the like student paper because they would have like classified ads. And so then that incurred the ire of the administration. And then Mary Lee Walsh basically like put Christine there and was like, listen, you got to stop this. So then like just CWC's mind just fucking exploded. And then it became this whole thing. And also before you go, there was a big war where Christine would go to this place called the Game Place, which is basically like an eBay, like GameStop, right? Where had this Jewish manager, Michael Schneider, and Kristen got kicked out for being a total creep, and like they would play like card games like Pokemon. So then Christine would like fucking creep out all the younger people and like would do like just bullshit, right? And so when she or he was banned from the Game Place, they went to like her and her parents went. I'm only using the pronouns because YouTube. I even deleted my tweet, by the way, because I said he. I don't want the fucking, the MB kids after me on Twitter. So,
I don't
her and her
think
parents-
the MB kids want to inherit Christian.
well,
anyway.
they are now. They are now because they say that if you don't use the pronouns, that it's bad. So that's another argument entirely. So Christine and her parents went to fucking war with Michael Schneider in the Game Place to the point where Barb and Christine got fucking arrested for trying to assault Michael Schneider with their car in the mall. And like, then there's like these people, the trolls would like record conversations.
All right, Gio, this is too much. A lot of watch the documentary.
Michael Schneider would call in to the Wikipedia because, okay, so the reason that Christine Chan got famous, have you ever come across Encyclopedia Dramatica?
It's like
Encyclopedia Dramatica was like the early internet. It was like the troll, like Wikipedia. Like it had a lot of like internet-based humor and irony, and it was all about like offending people. Like they would use like F slurs and everything like that. They would like have the like dramatic, disgusting images. They would like make fun of Columbine and shit like that. So Christine got profiled on Encyclopedia Dramatica, and it became this like whole like brain worm in the psyche of Chris Chan, because ever since like 2007, when the article came up, Christine has like tried to like get that article down, because that like created this whole universe of trolls and attention and troll shielding and people being with Christine, and then people trying to like defend Christine, then other trolls like trying to ruin Christine's life. Like it was just like there's so much stuff.
All right, Daniel has to go.
His name was Brandon Anderson. Ian Brandon Anderson pretended to be Chris Chan, the real Chris Chan. And there's hold up, Liquid Chris.
Please,
welcome Liquid Chris. Ian Brandon Anderson.
Daniel, get out of here while you still can. Escape.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that poor kid.
I think I just ruined Daniel's life.
What the fuck did you do?
I wrote. What's the chat saying? I don't even know. So Ian Brandon Anderson pretended to be Chris. Gio, if you scroll up. Gio, if what? Scroll up a bit. Gio. So Lisa, go down. Lisa, Gio, if you would like this, is your BMI was if you would be like this if your BMI was fine. What? Oh, Lev, scroll up. Oh my God. I can't believe this. Geo feeding viciously off the Chan energy. So your BMI was fine. Now go up more. Go up. You would like but now I was very disturbing view of you, my man. Grow some balls, please. What do you mean grow some balls? How? What do you mean, Lisa? Lisa, are you single, by the way? Fuck. See, I'm doing it. I'm sorry.
You could say Lisa's tearing you apart. But
wait. What do you mean very disturbing of you? Like grow some balls? What do you mean grow some balls?
All right. While she's answering, I want to show you guys this magnet over here. So this is a wooden magnet.
Oh man.
Created by my father. Look how intricate this magnet is over here. Look how beautiful it is. This could be yours if you become a $20 Patreon. Patreon.com/breaktherules is where you go. There's a lot of goodies. And in fact, now I have an updated graphic here that I could share. $5 patrons, secret Discord areas, Patreon-only streams. You also have the MP3 versions of the episodes after they come out before anybody else does. And $20 gives you magnets. So check out these magnets over here. We got the moth. We got maple, mahogany, ashwood, cherry.
It's about hitting the gym daily. Oh, I see.
There we go.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to get into some lifting. I generally like try to do at least like one physical thing a day now. Whether it's like going for walks or like I'm probably going to buy a weight set. I just have bands, but like Lisa, you're tearing me apart. Oh my God, the room is like the perfect like postmodern cinema masterpiece, because Tommy Wiseau is just a total nut job. And my friend, actually my best friend Chris, he like was obsessed with like the room. I shouldn't say his name, Chris, but like
$30 patrons.
$30 patron. Oh,
they're
sorry.
They're going to get a beautiful print from Gio right here, full of that.
No GF series.
Wait, you should do a Chris Chan print. What do you think?
I was thinking of one. I was thinking of doing a wood engraving, but I think I might do a painting of like the famous mugshot of Chris Chan in the Francis Bacon style. So wait, watch the Brittany Venti stream. Hit the gym, bro. This is very disturbing. You need to cleanse your mind and body. You won't talk shit that much. What do you mean I'm not talking shit? I didn't know. Do the PPPOA challenge. Yeah, maybe.
All right, and lastly, $50 patrons are going to get all of the above.
Sorry, Lisa, I didn't know what you were referring to, so I was just
all of the above. They're going to get all of the above plus custom magnets. Whatever you want my father to design, he's going to design it for you. You are also going to get another beautiful work from Geo, a painting in the Bob Ross style. You are going to get Jules Hamilton's beautifully painted Warhammer 40k figures. You are also going to get, if you, upon request, want one, a printout of one of the thumbs that my father painted. It has to specifically be the one that my father painted. I think you'll recognize the painting style. So there we go. Become a patron, patreon.com/breaktherules.
Sonnet you would engrave.
And you are, yes, you are going to help. Despite all the censorship and all these things that are happening right now, you are going to help us overcome. So that is all.
Listen, for the record, I'm not talking shit. I'm just like trying to be honest here. I mean, no, how did I talk shit though? I mean, maybe like I don't know. Like I was okay. I gotta admit, when it came, I was kind of talking shit a little bit. I'm sorry about that, but if I buy any arts of you guys, I want a total ownership return, some NFTs. Oh boy, maybe. No, I don't know. Like I think the CWC thing, I'm kind of like, I forget who said it to me. I think like someone like actually DM'd me saying like you have to stop because it's just poisoning yourself. Like, which is true. It's just poisoning. Like, because like I know it's like fun and like we remember the good times about like the fucking trolls and all that, but like really nowadays it's like in light of recent events, it's just so sad and pathetic. But if you use your brains, you would get shredded and eat fuss. I know, but like no. Here's the thing: denying my body is why I develop my brains to run away from my body. So this is why. I know that sounds so like stupid in Reddit, but like that's the truth.
Both can work simultaneously together. I think that's the right idea here.
Not only this stream. What do you mean? I wasn't talking shit in other streams. Okay, listen. Yes, I talk shit about certain people. That is true. Certain people like maybe I'm too hard on, but I don't know. Like people know me as like pretty amicable.
You are very amicable. You're a very amicable guy.
Okay, listen, Zero. I know we have a different opinion on Christine Chan. I personally, I don't know. When it comes to Christine, I'm very vengeful. I gotta realize that. But like that's, but some streams, your virgin archetype is coming up too much. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. But I mean, I can't deny who I am. I mean, that's.
I mean, theoretically speaking, just a thought I had. If they turn the prison experience of Christine into a reality show that may pay for some of the expenses of the prison itself in terms of donations and things like that, so the quality of life would be better, or do you think that is a privacy invading devil's bargain? What do you think?
No, I don't think Chris will transform Christine because they're gonna like probably put her whatever into solitary or a mental institution. So it's not like being like on a GP yard and having
it's not that like Orange is the New Black.
No, it's not gonna be like fucking. It's not gonna be like what was that? What was that called?
The love quest finally fulfilled, basically.
Oh God, maybe. Well, if it goes to a women's prison, probably.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So that's like yeah. Yeah, the reason I call him Christine is because I had just for YouTube purposes, just for OPSEC. I want you to culture thug, don't fuck with me. No, I mean like culture thug's all right. Culture thug does like a very specific thing that I don't think like we're not on the same wavelength. Wait, are you talking about the? Yeah.
By the way, I thought that this was fake. Apparently not. So actually in the same light that we were talking about regarding Christine. Do you see that article that I just posted here?
Wow. Plan B even.
California gives female inmates condoms, Plan B.
Well, there's a lot of like, there's also like a lot of sexual exploitation that goes on in women's prisons, like with guards. But then there are like, female guards that will like hook up with like male inmates. But there is like a lot of very like sexual abuse that goes on in women's prisons, like in terms of guards. I personally think like maybe you shouldn't have like male guards in women's prisons, and you shouldn't have female guards in male prisons, in my opinion. That's like just too much of a moral hazard. Because these like prison guys, they'll like literally like charm the pants off of a female guard who isn't like that attractive on average to begin with. I mean, not to stereotype, but then like a lot of prisoners on YouTube, they'll say like, yeah, the female guards, they have like very low self-esteem. So it's very easy for like a swab prisoner to just like chat them up, you know?
Interesting. Well, anyway, guys, this is the end of the stream. Thank you very much for watching. Next Tuesday, we are going to have Logo Daedalus and Amy Therese at it, and it's going to be wonderful. And then we are going to have Uncle Duma. Uncle Duma is going to be coming in for next Thursday. And then we are going to have, I believe, Patriot J, who's going to be coming in the Tuesday afterwards. He's already confirmed with me, so it's all good. And then we are going to have Jason Rizadrjani coming in as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about that. That's going to be Thursday, August 19th. Then we are going to have Tuesday, August 24th, Hotep Jesus. Hotep Jesus is going to be joining us, so be sure to watch that. Thursday, August 6th, Uber Boyo and Jonathan Peugeot go at it. Then we have Tuesday, August 31, Paul Rossi coming in. And then I think Count Dankula is on for Thursday, September 2. Don't quote me at that. I just have to confirm with the guy. But then again, that's what we have for you. And we're going to have a lot more for you as well. So thank you very much for watching. As always, you could find us on Apple. You could find us on Spotify. You could find us on DLive, on Twitch.
Thank you.
And, of course, on Odyssey as well. And, of course, patreon.com/breaktherules. One last time, I'm going to put the link in. You guys, if you become patrons, you are going to help us out a lot.
Tom. Reason he developed his election stuff is because he had to come for his way. Yeah, that's very true, Tom. That is true. You deserve more, Geo. You can put your brains to use. Yeah, I mean, my problem is, like, I don't know. I feel like...
Well, Chris Chan's kind of your vice. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, not that bad. No, I feel like by the time, people were mentioning meme analysis, like, he was, like, I'm... Like, meme analysis peak, I'm, like, obviously, like, way bigger than meme analysis. But, like, no, I feel like, I don't know, like, if I did, like, put in the work, I was, like, realistically, I'm 28 now. So, like, by the time I see any results, like, I'll be like, not that I'm not trying now, but, like, I don't know, like, I was saying to my old man, like, I'll be, like, what, 30 years old and, like, fucking, you know, I don't know what fucking... That's like wizardhood, bro.
Again,
it's like
Gio,
fuck.
Gio,
might as well Roblox myself. I don't know.
Gio, don't stop it. Stop it.
know.
No, this is fucking ridiculous, and I mean that it's fucking ridiculous. You act like, oh my god,
I'm done for it. Plus, like, the way things are going, like, in the world.
No, fuck
I will never get to travel to America
Gio,
ever.
Gio, stop it.
Like,
You're
fucking piece of shit.
I'm gonna sneak you into Canada. Don't worry.
Well,
about
apparently
it.
they're gonna say that you can only enter America with a Vagine passports.
All right, Gio. Listen,
I don't know, man.
We're gonna go through this. Don't worry. A lot of this is in our heads. Okay, we got to change the way that we think.
Because the world, like, isn't the irony that, like, when I go out, I have the capacity to actually, like, go out to the world. That, like, for fucking years I didn't was like, you know.
No, Gio, this is
just a basement dweller. Loser.
Gio, this is all the worst.
I'm actually out there. The world goes insane. That's fucking irony right there, man. It's like that one Twilight episode with the guy with the glasses. Finally, his bitch of a wife is dead. Finally, he's got all the resources and books in the world to read. His fucking glasses breaks after the nuclear explosion.
Gio, this is the
wrong.
That's
me.
No. Gio, what you have right now is a challenge. Gio. What you have right now before you is the challenge of a lifetime that you are going to overcome and you will overcome. This is a quote from Tupac Shakur.
But, like, the reality...
Let me finish, goddammit! Here's a quote from Tupac Shakur. You gotta make a change. It's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we eat. Let's change the way we live. Let's change the way we treat each other. You've got that part down. You see, the old way wasn't working, so it's on us to do what we got to do to survive. And Gio...
Oh, Russell Walters in the chat. Well, I forgot to message you, man. We're going to try to get John David Eber on, but, like, it's just...
You're not even acknowledging the Tupac quote, goddammit.
No, listen, the Tupac quote, did he write that when he was in the Bahamas after he faked his death? Or did he write that before?
No. That was from Changes. That was from a song of his.
Oh, that is a good song. I mean, I'm more of a Biggie person, but, like... I think, like, I mean, New York rap, like, was good in the early 90s, like, with people like Big L, and to an extent, like, you know, was Nas from New York, or was I forget. Like, I mean, New York rap has a different thing. Rogan Altered States tank does nothing. Yeah, the ISO tank. No, I mean,
wrong,
like,
wrong. It does a lot. You got to do the Wim Hof method. You got to do the cold showers. Gio, I'll teach you how to do the Wim Hof method.
I know how to I do a bit of it after I like have a.
All right,
like,
let's do it together then after this stream. Unless you're after the
No,
stream,
no,
as
you
soon as
breathe
this
through
is
your
over-
nose and you
No, Gio,
do
we're gonna
this
do it
30
together.
times.
We're gonna do it together, and then unless you want to do it on the stream, because we can do it on the stream too.
No, that's too cringe. That's
Okay, fine.
that's not-
Okay, off stream, we're doing it.
Oh,
Everybody,
no.
off stream, we're doing it. You promise, Gio? Let's do it together, just so I'll test you. I'll see how good you are. Okay. So anyway, guys, this is the end of the show. Thank you so much for watching. Tuesday, logo, Amy, it's going to be a lot of fun. Keep supporting us. Share this with all of your friends. Like, subscribe, of course, and click the bell. All that good stuff. That is going to help
Please,
us
we need
grow.
to grow so we could get drunk with power and like end up like Ethan Ralph. No, I'm fucking kidding. We'll never end up like Ethan Ralph. No, I mean, see, you're right. I'm just talking shit right now. I'm sorry. So
all right, this is the end, everybody. Take care. Good night, everybody.
Bye.